Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Hybrid Jams and Tea, and also Jen and Jake talk because, eh.
We're
But
talking about music
last
today.
last time you saw us, and in fact, the time before that, you actually technically saw us talking about. We're just talking about a lot of fucking hip hop. We're really leaning into the bit here, I guess. But this episode, if you have paid any attention to anything we've made over the years, has been a long time coming. And I think in many ways that because we started the podcast with a new album from this band, we were like, we gotta wait until the next one comes out so that we can do a discography thing because, again, 'twas inevitable. So I, of course, recruited Jen, the other biggest clipping fan that I know, because we're going to talk about the discography of clipping. We also kind of sort of went over this a little bit in our last video. We talked about our favorite MCs, our favorite rappers of all time, of which we hold David Diggs of clipping in very, very high esteem. But that being said, clipping is more than just David Diggs. I'll throw it over to Jen for just a second because I don't remember the second person's last name.
Okay. So the makeup of clipping is, yes, Daveed Diggs, the MC, but also the instrumentalists and producers, William Houston and Jonathan Snipes, who all three of these guys met in college. All three of them grew up around Oakland, California. The band kind of starts as a project for them in their period in academia, and it's continued to be something that they work through, even as the three of them independently have kind of their own careers, which we're going to talk about in bits and pieces throughout this Discog breakdown. But obviously, David has history as an actor, and William and Jonathan bring their musical stylings to stuff like film scores, as well as their own work that's under their own name, as well as some other aliases. So this is a super group of sorts, but one that kind of, this is where it started, and the individual membership stuff branches out and then kind of comes back in, depending on what one particular group member might be particularly interested in at any given time, which is something that I want to talk about as we go through the different albums. My question for you, Jake, is where do we want to start on the timeline here?
Timeline wise, I think because they have been making music for probably a lot longer than most people would assume that they have. But I think we can begin properly with the release that I think is, I don't want to say it maybe put them on the map, but it certainly got some ears towards them. It's kind of the Clipping self-titled mixtape, which is not technically self-titled. I don't actually think it technically has a name. That's just kind of what people call it, but it is their 2013 release that is mainly just two songs. It's really a split side single, but both of these songs have an a cappella version worked into their release, which, you know, Clipping are going to do a lot of weird shit throughout their career, and this is just kind of presaging that in that, like, one thing you must understand about David Diggs is that, like, yes, you might know him from Hamilton, but the real takeaway from that is that David Diggs is a theater kid. You must remember this because it is essential to the DNA makeup of clipping. I mean, I remembered actually it was a friend of the show and frequent guest Jacob Sanchez who once called him the Rod Sterling of hip hop, which doesn't quite show through yet, but with Chain and Jump, which creatively named, they're going to do a lot of that throughout the course of their career as well, is that we get the sort of front-facing aesthetic appeal of clipping, that being the combination of harsh industrial noise aesthetics and hip hop. And while far from the first people to do something like this, they're taking more from the Dalek fusion of industrial hip hop, and less so maybe the concurrently the another group popular at the time was Death Grips. They got a lot of comparisons to Death Grips at the time, and honestly, with how these groups synergize, that's not a terrible comparison. I would compare like Flatlander synths are very equivalent to the backing production on any given clipping song, really. And David really is kind of the ride of this presence, but it's a little bit less genre fluid and very much more sticking to the roots of hip hop, because that's a really core important thing here is that I would say that clipping, even from the outset, sought to be very deconstructive. They sought to talk about their genre, to talk about their music through their music. Again, it doesn't quite show until their first official release, but lyrically, the preoccupations of early clipping is very much street life. It's very much, I mean, again, not totally dissimilar to Death Grips. I mean, really the comparison you can go back to as far as the 60s is the Velvet Underground, is that the kind of shit these people were talking about is, being on drugs, living in the dregs of society, falling between the cracks and all that. And it's very well complemented by David's very speedy, very confident flows. He's got a very I guess the term I would be looking for is he sounds like a very post Kanye rapper in that he's got a lot of the same immediate skill and acumen that you would associate from that sort of multi-talented kind of like I have to be the producer, I have to be the everything, but he's just working with other people. So it's an interesting release, very solid songs, but I think Jen will definitely agree with me is that clipping as we know it does not fully unify until the 2013 release Midcity. Now, Jen, I know you in particular, like we both are kind of Midcity champions in that we're just like, why does nobody talk about this album as much as they should? Because it's totally within the realm of quality of the other clipping releases. So I'm gonna hand it over to you for a sec because this is a very special album, I think.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say to add on what you were saying about Death Grips is that comparison was made at a time before both of those bands made big shifts in the mid 2010s.
Yeah.
That comparison starts in 2013 before the powers that be, when all we have to compare these two are this album, the self-titled, and on Death Grips' side, stuff like The Money Store and Government Plates, which I would argue they were operating in pretty similar lanes in terms of their utilization of industrial hip hop to tell stories about, hardcore West Coast and East Coast street life. So that comparison doesn't come from nowhere, but both of those bands kind of outgrow that kinship in different ways by going in the directions that they end up going. But to
Mhm.
start with Mid-City, and one thing that I think will help contextualize what makes Mid-City so good is talking about the intro and specifically talking about the KEXP live performance, which was my introduction to this era of the band. And that performance starts with a performance of this intro. Now, Clipping likes to start every album with a song that's just called intro, and so we'll
Intro.
refer to them as the intro for whatever album, or it's complicated, it's a mouthful sometimes, but it is what it is. The intro for Mid City is a perfect encapsulation of the sensibilities of the band at the time because you have the a cappella approach again to David's delivery with these sharp, very harsh stings of industrial noise as a kind of transition from one verse to the other that kind of builds in intensity. And this sets the stage for what the band is going to sound like. That mix of a pure love of West Coast hip hop and wanting to experiment with how well that genre can fit into the sounds that you can make with a more industrial edge. And frankly, the thing that I love about Mid City is that it is the most um, clean negotiation of the purest form of those two ideas. You have songs like Loud and About That and Guns Up, which I think in particular illustrate the way that they were able to combine the most basic sounds like the bad word, but the most standard way that you could think about this kind of genre fusion. It's kind of a proof of concept of what the band is going to be. And I make all of that sound like it's kind of a useless prototype so many years removed, but it's really not, man. I was listening to
No.
this week to get ready for this album, and there's still stuff here that I appreciate that I can't get on any other clipping album. And the first one I want to point out is it's still one of David's most versatile set of performances, mainly
Yes.
because he is not limiting himself in the very formal ways that he would come to do on the later albums. And those are two things. David has two rules for writing raps that he took for certain releases that break occasionally. One is that he doesn't use the N-word, which he's never broken, I don't think, on a clipping record. And the other
You
is that
know, bro. I never
Did
thought
you not
about
know
that.
this?
And now like I'm like I feel like I'm having like the Gosling in Blade Runner 2049 and like all the papers are in my eyes and I'm like scanning through it and I'm like, oh my God. I never thought about that. Holy shit.
But yeah, one thing that he's never done is he's never said the N word on a clipping record. And the other thing that he does sprinkle in, but throughout several releases, you will never hear David rapping in first person.
Hmm.
Now, on this album, you will a handful of times. And that creates, as this album has aged, an interesting dissonance where on songs like Real, especially the first person expression of very braggadocious attitudes, feels a bit jarring in comparison to not just everything else that we've heard on the album, but every clipping song that would come after, which is, the distance for me is just that's not how David tells these stories. Because I think of clipping first and foremost as a narrative project.
Very
All of
much
their
so.
albums have a narrative sense to them of these are the kinds of stories that we want to tell that are, reflecting things on their minds, but you're not necessarily going to get much in the way of, autobiographical testimonies of street life from David's first person point of view because as far as I understand, that just isn't his history, right? He's interested in
Hmm.
that sort of thing, and he grew up around that sort of environment. But due to, again, his academic background, that was a thing that he more or less had a distance from pretty early on in his life when he was growing into his artistry. And so a lot of his expressions of, you know, gangster environments, street culture, things like that, come from a kind of arm's length approach where you're hearing stories being told about the kinds of experiences that one could possibly have in this setting without David coming out straightforwardly and being like, you'll never believe this crazy shit that happened last night at the spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah. At the function. Shit
Yeah.
was crazy, bro. I,
Last
you
night was a
know,
clipping album, bro.
you put it like that, and it's like you can draw a very clean line of comparison to again the other rapper we talked about in the same esteem, that being one Mr. Kendrick Lamar, in the respect that they both began being very narratively concept driven people with academic backgrounds who have a little bit of an outsider looking in perspective. Another thing you got to keep in mind too is that when we say all this stuff like, oh, David's a theater kid, or oh, this is, he did Hamilton, you're like, oh yeah, Hamilton, right? Now he's doing raps. It's very, very evident very quickly that this isn't gonna be any soft shit, man. Like this is no Brockhampton talking about my feelings kind of shit. This is no like swimming pool shit. Like no, these are pretty fucking hardcore depictions of pretty fucking hardcore things and with a really fucking hardcore sound. Like if you go into this not expecting something that is a little bit abrasive, bare minimum, you might not be going into the right thing. Midcity in particular is a very sonically, I mean, hideous album. It is very thoughtfully put together. It sounds amazing. It sounds what I love about Clipping's beats is how tactile they are, is that no matter what they're doing, what they're using, which are often literally, bobs and ends and clings and clangs that they sample, like literally like taking forks and throwing them against walls types of shit. But they will make it into something that's cogent. They will make it into something creative and they'll make it into something that David can ride, but they also make it match the content very easily. If you are hearing a depiction of something that is unsettling, you're going to hear the way that it feels unsettling. Or like a gunshot in a clipping song is like it goes off right here. You feel the fucking oil of the barrel kick back. You hear the bullet drip and fucking go right here and go like everything about clipping is about tactility. It's about the almost synesthetic quality you can get. So it's why when they really do start leaning more into the 3-6 Mafia horrorcore of it all, which I would present an argument is still kind of here. It's just that the horrorcore is not dressed through a lens of, scary movies or cyberpunk, or it's through street life. It's just framing it in the way that it would be framed later on. And in that respect, this is like listening to a particularly intense episode of The Wire. And as such, I get a lot of really, like, this is some real edge of your seat shit. And properly, it is very entertaining. It is very loud and it is very well written. Like, from the get-go, I have no complaints with David's pen, like at all, basically.
To make a more contemporary comparison, because you're right in pointing out David's a theater kid, David is a hip hop nerd, but these guys are also movie buffs. And so when I
Hmm.
listen to Midcity and I listen to the self-titled, I think particularly of Snow on the Bluff, the movie, which came out around the same time
Yeah.
and
Oh,
was
I
seen as
like
being in
that.
that kind of lineage of, like John Singleton's movies, like the Hughes brothers movies of the late 90s, but taking a more independent aesthetic that you could see drawing inspiration from like found footage, live leak, YouTube, things like that, to create a more 2010s neo-realist cinematic approach. And something different is going on here with Mid-City of using the approach of an industrial soundscape to create a harsher portrayal of gangster rap that maybe isn't, yeah, textbook definition horrorcore, but with the way that David approaches these things thematically, it's going for the same kind of ethos.
And that's what makes it still hold up. You go back to it, and I really do think this holds up about as well as basically any other project that they've made. I maybe wouldn't this is not a very sonically beginner friendly album, and while I still think it's worth listening to, and you could start here because it gives you the perfect kind of baseline example for how aggressive shit can get. It also it only suffers from the fact that I think that there are just better entry points in this discography that you'll probably like immediately understand a bit more. But don't see this at the beginning of the discography and think, oh, this is like nascent clipping. It's like, no, 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 no. These guys have been working for a long time. They come out completely fully formed. They have a really distinct identity. And I love that you kind of point out that they are kind of riding on the wave of the internet horror thing. Like it's like once, 2011, 2012 rolls around, we're seeing these really unique forms of internet horror pop up. And I feel like clipping kind of come in and immediately sort of tailor themselves to be, you know, received well in a climate like that. Like they'll immediately start leaning into that super duper heavy as soon as the very next year, which I think is really, really smart of them. And it also makes me think of like it does really clearly take a lot from like John Singleton movies, or I think of shit like Deep Cover, for instance.
Yeah.
And then basically you have clipping who come after that. And then I like, as I sort of mentioned with before, I also associate the rise of clipping with the rise of people like Jordan Peele. And ultimately, again, culminating in the fact that we have a very, Afrocentric led horror movie happening this year that is scored by the trailer with a clipping song. So it's like there's a lot of cultural waves that I wouldn't say maybe clipping ride, but really, really benefit from that allow them to not have to cater to anybody. But everybody who likes clipping can sort of naturally stumble upon them and be like, oh, this is my shit. Like, yeah, immediately. Let's go.
One of my favorite qualities of the writing on Mid-City is that David is already establishing one of my favorite things that he does with his pen is that this guy just loves describing settings. Like
Hmm.
this dude will spend whole songs just describing what a room looks like after something has happened. And it's the best shit you've ever heard. Like
Those are some of
bullshit.
my favorite clipping songs, like dead ass,
Well,
like just David describing a fucking room.
the iteration on this album is it's called Bullshit. And here you
Mm.
get three different scenes of kind of aftermaths of, decadence, wild parties. The first verse, Patron bottle empty on the floor of the Maybach, leaking liquor slowly on a red stained weave track. And then they move through a couple different scenes there, and it all culminates in this moment of kind of ego death of like all this materialism, all this hedonism. Like that's what the title is. It's all bullshit, right? We have to, and there's no inherent mission statement there. It's not like, oh, I need to find something better. It's just like, no, I'm fucked up. It's 4 o'clock in the morning and
And
I
I
feel
feel fucked
terrible.
up. Yeah, it's like that happens like at least on once on every clipping album is that there's like a really super existential song about getting absolutely fucking toasted out of your mind and basically like disassociating in some form or another. And the fact that they bring that back multiple times but it never feels like they're repeating the same idea is just kind of like a testament to the fact that we're gonna describe clipping in not just horror movie terms, but I feel like in specifically cinematic terms, because clipping is a band that has, you know, mise en scène. Like they are people who put together scenes as much as they put together songs, which is why theater nerds and movie nerds love them so much.
Yeah, I think that description, that mise en scène descriptor is perfect because yeah, in these kind of I'll call them the setting songs, each one of them has a different thematic or aesthetic
Hmm.
purpose. So each one, as you kind of progress through them, feel unique and they feel like they're serving something different for whatever project they're sitting on, whether that's bullshit for this album or to skip ahead all the way to the end, Polaroids off of Dead Channel Sky, which
Oh
we'll
yeah,
get
we
to
got
later.
we got shit to say about that one.
Is there, let's see, what am I missing? I want to start maybe a controversial take on this
Oh.
band, but it's something that I'm going to flag as a point of improvement for them over time. Clipping has a, for me, difficult relationship with the idea of the guest verse
You know, I know exactly what you mean as soon as you said it. I think I'm about to agree with you hard.
because and it's hit or miss on Midcity and it gets better every time that it goes along.
Hmm.
But clipping, I'm not saying it's anybody's fault in particular and that they're like not good at working with
It's
people.
just the
But
result of the
clipping,
alchemy.
yeah, the alchemy doesn't always mix. And so sometimes a particular guest doesn't feel like they really sit right with the cinematic and the narrative approach that the band is taking. And to point out an example that I've always found particularly egregious, it's that last verse on Get It with the with the
Yeah,
guy that's just like, I
yeah,
want to Instagram this and have 20 people like it. Like, and the my main complaint with all that is not that it doesn't, I shouldn't, it is an aesthetic departure and sometimes that works, but it feels like it's out of touch with the
song.
thematics of it all. Yeah, it feels like it's out of touch with the song. Where David, even when he's flirting with first person storytelling, always has that little twinge of irony there, where like things are going to go wrong and this speaker is being a bit narrow-minded. Whereas some
Yeah,
of the guest verses will come in and just say, yeah, I want you to suck my dick, and there's just like no additional meaning to it, and you just kind of have to roll with it. It doesn't hit the
yeah.
same.
It is, I'm going to use one of our favorite words. It's because clipping are so excellent at song conceits that if you deviate from that conceit even a little bit, you're going to come across as contributing to the track in a way that's less substantial than they are. Like just kind of inherently. And it's not, again, it's not something that I think really weighs it down, but it is also like, yeah, this is a thing that they notably just improve basically with every release.
Yeah, it's a thing I want to go ahead and mark here as a way to say we're going to be talking about good guest verses on clipping albums as we go through
Uh-huh.
their stuff. And this is a point where I just want to say, yeah, also the one thing you might find difficult about Mid-City is that some of the guest verses leave something to be desired. Now, it's not to be said for folks like Jolene Goodwin, who provides
Yes.
the hook for bullshit, or the instrumental
Fantastic.
contributions of people like Basek, or even I even think Kill Rogers' verse on Killer is a lot better than his
I
verse on Get
agree
It.
completely. I think that one's absolutely a keeper.
So it's never a complete deal breaker, but it's something that if you don't know what to expect, you might find a little bit off-putting about the music. And it's something that, at least for me, has been a long train of thought in wrestling with in terms of, how does clipping, how do you make a good clipping guest verse? And we're going to talk about that as we go through some of the releases, I'm sure.
Oh
But
yeah.
here in Mid-City are some places where you might find an example of a not so great clipping feature. But if you're just getting into this band for the first time, don't let that discourage you.
And thankfully, I think we have some pretty great examples to follow up that point on when we go to the next album, which is a very just a year later. They started and they never stopped. We have the technical, self-titled. I say technical because there is no I in it because it's clipping.
Boom.
That's just what it's called. Because again, Jen sort of referred to this as that the sort of mostly the conceit of this record is that it is not, first person storytelling. There's no I. Get it? And as a result, this to me is like the complete other side of the coin of Midcity is that this is now keep in mind when I say this, I'm not referring to the band sanding off any edges, but this is them polishing who they are, refining their aesthetic, and being like, okay, this is the album where it's going to be like all the other albums are going to branch from this one in a significant way. Like, this is kind of the one where they lay down the formula with, and it doesn't really have maybe a huge unifying conceit or a narrative conceit, much like the other records that would follow it. But we get almost a if I compare them all to horror movies or horror adjacent things or thrillers, this to me is an anthology horror movie where each of them is very distinct and each of them maybe even swaps genres. But I think the thing I love the most about this album is to me, the beats are insane. Like as soon as you get intro, which is like, minute long, but still David is going off. But the proper beginning of this with Body and Blood, woo, man, Body and Blood, man, this is a song. This is a fucking killer song. You've got that beat, which is like, there's almost something liquid about it. It almost sounds like something is like, it sounds like a mechanical sort of like mechanism, but also there's like water in it. It's like, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And then there's like this
Yeah.
knocking industrial fucking drum in the background. And then David comes on here and sounds positively fucking psychotic. Like he's just like, you a bad bitch. And you're like, whoa, holy shit, dude.
And
And
this is
it, go
This is where
ahead.
a particular genre of clipping songs begins, which is the femme fatale narrative that you will see many, many times on this album and on subsequent records, where David loves writing badass women
Loves it.
who are firmly entrenched in this culture, who do not fuck around, who take no shit and who get things done and who look good doing it. And I just want to, as a grand statement about all these songs, it's incredible that we have a rap group that is so interested in portraying, female dominance in this kind of genre environment, even though obviously David's not a woman, he's able to use his storytelling prowess to create these characters that serve as subversions of, classic images of fucking black street crime, of gangster rap, of, the hardcore, even the horrorcore stuff in the 90s has a very harsh masculinity to it. And
Hmm.
so them starting off their self-titled with a song like this feels like them stating that they're going to be doing something different with the genre like this. That they're going to be taking a kind of different approach to what kind of stories they're telling about this kind of life, what kind of experiments they want to do with this genre and the characters that they can bring into it.
And I also think this song serves as a wonderful pleb filter because if you look at the actual lyrics to it, one of the set of bars is literally, she don't need you for shit but your dick and your guts and your veins. It's literally about a woman killing and eating men's dicks. It's awesome. Like I don't like there's if you're instantly like, oh, the gross descriptions of this is not a band for you. Like immediately this is a release that's easier on that side of things, and it is still like probably not for you if that's something that bugs you, but if you are a Spike Spiegel enjoyer, if you are a fucking I love women who can kick my ass, you're gonna get like they're one of my favorite examples of this phenomenon is actually on Splendor and Misery. Two of them actually very subtly are some of my favorite examples of this. But uh the Body and Blood just sort of like that's the sort of starts the trend as just the opening barn burner. Like they clipping are really fucking good at it. Like they can come out and just be like, yeah, we have this weird conceit and we're this narrative fucking like whatever, but also we just bang. Like there's plenty of shit that is just gonna go hard in the whip and you can ride that shit out. It doesn't all have this sort of weird esoteric appeal to it the way we're describing it. In fact, that's the best thing about clipping is that they're always doing both of these things at the same time without sacrificing one for the other. They're always intense, but they're always thoughtful. And I mean, that shows through on this album because it feels like one of the things they're trying to play with the idea of is really just the idea of subverting a hip hop album. Like there are specific flows on here that David adopts that are like, a more triplet flow-ish thing where it's just like, oh, I kind of like you're kind of taking the piss right now. And it never comes across as though he's like looking down on it, but though he is inverting it. He's taking these things and making them fucked and evil and like using it to actually emulate what's being on drugs is like and have that be a narrative element rather than something that just kind of sort of informs the music or the mood of what's going on. He's like, no, 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 no. I'm going to take all of the parts of hip hop and just sort of like smash it together, present it to you, and make you think about it because you can't listen to clipping without being at least marginally knowledgeable about tropes and expectations of what a hip hop record even is. And this is kind of the strongest example of that for me.
Yeah, I mean, clippings track twos always kind of go immediately. They're very good way to establish that, like, yes, we're going to have a thoughtful, subversive experience, but we're not going to forget to have a fucking good time while we're doing
Mm-hmm.
it. And Body and Blood sets that kind of expectation perfectly, where it's like, yes, we're seeing a very subversive and thoughtful take on the imagery that this genre usually provokes, but it also just thumps.
So fucking good. Again, like this is perfect car playlist type shit. And I mean, Work Work, the song that follows up Body and Blood, same fucking thing, honestly. That's another one that just comes through and it's that fucking sick, satisfying, metallic ass percussion that comes in at the very fucking end. And yeah, it'll kind of like occasionally some of the songs will bookend here with just like actual blasts of harsh noise that again, that's not going away, so I hope you get used to it. You gotta have a little like part of yourself that's a little masochistic. You gotta have that little like, I'm not a fan of Merzbow, but I've listened to a lot of his music, so like there's a push and pull there. But like still, a lot of the songs here are super accessible and cool. There's one of my favorite examples of something that they frequently do also is that they have what's called their story songs which on the last album it begins with the song Story, and with each successive release they'll kind of like put another like story 3, story 4, but not story 3. I think that's lost into the ether. I don't think we've seen that one yet.
Yeah,
One
story
of the
three
stories we're
either
missing
either never came out or
is
is
lost.
done but is lost.
And like it's theorized to be something but there's also an obscure one of them. I think it might be story 4 that's like half of an alt j song and also half of a clipping song. I got really into clipping a long time ago and I made a playlist with all of them together so I could listen to them. Basically it is a story that kind of continues going. It's like the same it's actually holy fuck, it's kind of like Kendrick's The Heart. Wow. Fucking anyway.
You're killing me.
Just kind of had that little moment there, but like they continue telling this sort of like story where like there'll be like a new character that'll come from the previous song, but they'll be the main character this time. And each time they elaborate on that story, it's great. Like all of these songs are like universal knock it out of the park moments for me. And story 2 is absolutely one of the best examples on here alongside like fucking again summertime fucking love taking off. I love Get Up, one of the most creative clipping songs where you get that fucking radio fucking like, oh God, my alarm's waking me up. Wait a minute, that's not what that is. And then they make the beat out of the alarm, and then the alarm evolves into like everything. It's like that fucking Satoshi Kon short film about waking up and how the world looks all different. It's so fucking cool, man. It's such a great idea. And also
Yeah.
they have Gangsta Boo on here.
I listened to this earlier this week and forgot that Gangsta Boo was on this song. So when
Which, I
she,
mean, firstly, R.I.P. Gangsta Boo. I feel
yes.
bad I didn't throw a mention to Gangsta Boo when I mentioned 3 6 Mafia in our hip hop video. All my love to Gangsta Boo. She was great. She's always great. She's great on this song. Uh, I don't. I don't love the hook on Tonight, if I'm honest, though.
It's
It's
okay.
still,
We can be honest and say that David's singing voice is not the best, and
well,
sometimes he tries to push it a little too far.
and like tonight's one of definitely like the lower tier clipping songs for me, but it also is not made much better by the fact that Enlacing is literally just this song but 1,000 times better. Like just a gradual level up in basically every way. You got like the club trap vibe of everything, but like the ascendant really big production on that one, which we'll get to it. But like that's the only moment on here where I really think like it drops below the board. I don't think that maybe this is as big. Like I don't think of this album lesser than like other people do, but I don't think it's maybe quite the jump from Mid-City that a lot of people think. I think it's really more of a this is just the other side of Mid-City. Like I don't really view it as an evolution. I just kind of view it as a reflection instead.
Yeah, I see these. I see these in a similar way where they're kind of almost sister projects that
Yes.
are dealing in a lot of very similar aesthetics that stay very close together thematically. They're dealing with a lot of the same or similar soundscapes and are generally going for the same kind of overall narrative vibe and intended takeaway from the audience. But I mean, there are things that you're going to get on the self-titled that you're not going to get on any other clipping album,
Hmm.
even if some of the songs, as you mentioned earlier, kind of sort of serve as prototypes for stuff that we're going to hear much later that are executed in very different ways. But one that I want to make sure we don't overlook
Mm.
is Dream, which is one of my favorite clipping songs
Yes.
because
Yes.
it's so understated and it's the first time we really hear clipping being able to sell themselves as a more almost like stoner rap, you know?
Yeah.
Like a
I didn't really.
psychedelic hip hop.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like taking that and like and it makes sense because around the same time we are seeing the ascendancy of the Travis Scotts and ASAP Rockies of the world that are like really focusing on that heavy kind of drugged out psychedelic vibe.
Yeah, but Dream is a lot more subtle. I mean, the hook is
Hmm.
David whispering,
It's
and
great. It's so fucking like
using like a
chilling.
yeah, and using like a really low part of his register for the verses. So it's turned way up, so you can obviously hear everything that he's saying, but you can tell that he's using a very different cadence. And even and this is another, David's a hip hop nerd. The title should make you think of what you're thinking of. It was all a dream. Pictures in Murder Dog magazine. Like he goes there. He knows what you're thinking of. Um,
Uh-huh.
and that's it. That's his thing. That's his thing on a lot of the albums is that not just he's never referencing it for no reason. It's clearly an inversion of, Juicy in that a lot of the dream feels more like a nightmare or feels more neutral in the sensations that on this song the character is experiencing, which, ends in grab the bass off the table and bag it up for the fiends, get the day
It's
started, that sort of thing. It lines up very nice thematically with Get Up.
early clipping is kind of like to describe its horror, it's the horror of sobering up. It's the horror of suddenly becoming cognizant and then looking around you, taking inventory and being like, oh fuck, everything's fucked. Like, that's a really primal thing in clipping's early music that I feel like is so present in stuff like that specifically, where what like David is really wonderful at perspective changes. He's so great at immersing you in one thing and then yanking the rug out from under you the next. And it makes you like actually be like, you take inventory in a way that would take you a lot longer to do that with another hip hop song. Not to say that this is like, better or deeper, but it's just like you get what it's about way quicker than you would with another song just because they're that smartly designed. Like you can really tell that they're trying to, be a they're trying to make the listener, they're trying to jolt them awake, they're trying to be like, hey, hey, motherfucker, pay attention to me. And like, yeah, I am. I'm awake.
I am awoke. This album also ends in a really strange way that none of the other ones do, which it ends on a track called William's Mix. That is William Hudson's kind of medley overture, but it's at the
Yeah.
end of all the songs on the album. I think it's really interesting. I think it sounds really nice, but I'm not gonna lie to you and say that I listen to it every time I listen through
All
this.
10 minutes of it? Nah, it's I have a confession about a later song where I'm just like, y'all, I've listened to this song all the way through one time just to say I did it, and that's all. Because I mean, well,
We'll
like,
get there. We'll get there. We'll
you
get there.
know, if you're trying to get into clipping and you're encountering these moments that are just kind of like, this is kind of unfriendly and weird, don't feel bad. And like, if you just got to skip through certain songs that are just really hard on the ears or really like, don't begrudge yourself too much. Like, again, you got to be a certain kind of freak to like harsh noise in the first place. So I don't
No.
blame you if you're like, this just hurts my ears, man. Like, I get it. But I will say there are some releases in this discography that still might cater to you. Like one of my favorite releases that would come out right before the next record. I think a couple of months before their next album came out, they dropped the Wriggle EP. And the Wriggle EP is like, okay, if clipping does lots of horror ideas, this is them taking all of the sex scenes out of the horror movies and making an EP about them. Because Wriggle is basically an excuse for them to fit as many like depraved acts of sexuality into about 20 or so minutes that they could. They just absolutely go off on it. It's some of the most like indulgent, like this is nothing but like violence, murder, sex, blah blah blah. Like it is the most animal brained kind of clipping release. And it's a lot of fucking fun, man. You get Shooter, which is David basically grocery bag rapping the entire time about tons of shooting people, which I'm not like, you could find this very annoying. I listen to this shit like daily. It's so funny. Shooter had a gun, cashew. Fucking, it's so funny. It's so
But it was
funny.
not to be Hamley.
Like, it's
No, this is a
fantastic.
hashtag. This is an entire song of hashtag raps.
It's
And
so
and
good.
it's so good because it's so like it's unashamedly fun with it, you know?
Hmm.
He doesn't feel like he's trying to wink at you. It feels really rhythmic in the way that he's able to, just move from kind of pun to pun. And
This,
frankly, it helps so much that all of the gun sounds are all field
mhm.
recordings that they did.
Yeah,
Like they just
it's awesome.
found
The
a bunch of
bullet bouncing
guns.
on the floor is part of the beat. Like everything, like again, they use that shit like the buffalo. No parts wasted, man. They're gonna use every fucking thing, and they get real fucking nasty on this. Hot fuck no love with Cakes Tequila. Oh man.
Man.
They've got some shit that I would be like, yeah, I have reticence about reading this on the internet. I don't want footage of myself saying this shit. But it's great. It's great.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
this is one of the few times I'll say this where, well, not one of the few times, but one of the times where the album cover it can maybe also serve as a pleb filter.
a little bit. I mean, you just see that and you're instantly like, oh, it certainly does plant the seed of like clipping definitely have like a dancey vibe to them that we won't
Yes.
see for a while, but boy, when it comes back, will it come back with a vengeance. And like this is just an EP that feels like a really solid collection of songs that feel a bit frivolous, yes, but not frivolously assembled together. Like this is again an EP that I could listen to literally daily just because it's great for like moving, doing shit. If you have to like do chores or you got like a job or something, throw on the Wriggle EP and 20 minutes will fucking disappear instantly. I absolutely guarantee you, which is, I think, maybe a strategic move on their part, considering that the album they released later that very same year would be 2016's Splendor and Misery, which now, don't get me wrong. I love the previous two clipping albums, but this is the point where clipping becomes a Jake ass Jake band. Because Splendor and Misery is like easily the most inaccessible, strange, out there thing they've ever made. To the point where that even reflects its strangeness in how it's assembled musically, and that they clearly did not give a fuck as to whether or not people thought this would bump because it's not really concerned with that. Like on maybe two songs here, I would say have that traditional rhythmic clipping vibe to them. The rest of this is a audio experiment basically. This is a cosmic horror story that's also an amazing science fiction universe thing that I mean, the fact that this is accomplished in less than like 45 minutes is absolutely stunning to me. Every time I go back to this album, I'm impressed in its construction of like it paints this insanely broad portrait that like draws from so many disparate areas. One of my favorite songs on here is the Long Way Away, where they have the kind of gospel slave spiritual chanting sort of choir vocals of this sort of talking about this science fiction world that's being like ripped apart by fighting. And one of my favorite examples of clipping sort of femme fatale trope here is that they make a point to say that the women are shooting their guns and then the men are protecting their homes. And I'm like, you had to throw that in there, David. I love that. I love that for you. But like this, you see like this image of this huge fucking like battle on this planet that's, you know, calling to mind like Halo and shit. And then, but the real like conceit of the story is that there is a huge intergalactic slave ship that is going through the cosmos where one of the transportees awakens and becomes sentient and starts to live aboard the ship and ultimately wants to like commandeer it and get the fuck out of there because why the fuck wouldn't he? And the my favorite example of the femme fatale trope here is the one where they do a perspective shift or switch, and it is basically the computer of the ship personified by David describing the main character going through all these routines, and you're slowly listening to a computer gain sentience. It starts observing him like with these cold analytical, like doing all of these things, performing all of these tasks, and then eventually it starts to be like, but why? Like he's not accomplishing anything. He's just like he's alive. He's gonna die. Like what is he doing this for? And eventually the machine becomes so fixated on him that it straight up falls in love with him and tries to help him escape and like, you know, reconfigures itself so that he can steer it. And I'm like, dude, what Philip K. Dick shit? Like, oh, this is so cool.
So I want to do two things. I want to provide a little bit of context for the history of
Please.
this album. So we take a little bit of a break from the band. The self-titled is 2013. This comes out in 2016. In between then, all three of them go their separate ways for a little while. David is starting work on Hamilton, and either William or Jonathan, I can't remember which, is doing a couple film score
Hmm.
gigs. And so it was uncertain for a bit where the band was going to go next, especially since David, especially his
If
profile
anywhere.
his profile in a very different sector of the entertainment industry was starting to rise. And so it became uncertain, is there going to be another clipping album? What's that going to sound like? Da 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 da. The Wriggle EP was a kind also serves as kind of a cure-all to that worry in the
Hmm.
fandom
Be
at the
like, hey,
time.
hey, we're still here.
Yeah, they're like, hey, we're still here, we're still getting shit done. So we're gonna, it's not as big as the album, but it's still, a change for us. It's something we want to have fun doing, etc. But then Splendor and Misery comes along. And the other thing I want to say about this album is that I just got finished teaching this album to some college English students. If you don't know this about me, I teach freshman English right now at my college, and I taught this album as a unit where we were looking at different forms of literature. So we were talking about a film, we talked about this album, we talked about a video game. The rest aren't important. But when we did this album, I prefaced it very I prefaced it very prominently by saying like this is not the way that you normally think of an album and the kind of stories that albums tell. Like this has a more novelistic structure to it,
Yeah.
especially in its sonic approach to the songs all smoothly transitioning into each other. There's only one moment where you get a beat of silence in between tracks, and that doesn't happen until the
Mm.
very end. And so for 35 out of the 39 minutes of this album, you're hearing basically one string of music
Hmm.
that mixes in different elements as it proceeds. And that gives it a very storytelling feel to it. It moves like a long video game cutscene in between environments and moments in the story. And, sometimes there's a fade to black, but the story never stops. and it's always kind of moving in one particular direction. It has a sense of pacing to it that no other, not even albums that we describe as concept albums really have. I hesitate to even call this a concept album because of how firmly narrativized it is. It becomes something else entirely in its appeal.
It actually, the closest thing I can compare it to is actually the Jeff, I can't remember his last name, but there is a very famous, particularly in the UK, rendition of War of the Worlds that is renditioned as a prog rock album that basically sounds like Genesis or Pink Floyd doing the story to H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds. And honestly, that feels like the only thing I've ever heard I'd compare this to, where it can just sort of jump forward and backward in terms of it's like, again, it'll like lock you into the perspective of this guy on this ship, or it will just transition into being like a third person like depiction of just this horrible future that has clearly befallen this. Like you have to piece together the world like through the information. You kind of have to sort of see what it informs, I guess. But like the more you think about it, the more carefully laid all of this information feels, but it doesn't ever like relent in how engaging it is. Like I remember one of the most prominent things about the main character of this is that in order to motivate himself to keep going, he repeats Kendrick's Control verse, which is such a good detail because it's specifically right in 2016. Like every rapper was talking about the Control verse. So naturally, this would be something that this person who like that uses raps to motivate themselves, like, yeah, a lot of people were fucking doing that when that happened. Like everyone was like, I remember kids, like I remember after hearing To Pimp a Butterfly, there were people who tried to rap the Control verse but couldn't do it, like it was a fucking epic rap battle of history. So like this taps into something primal, but it also like the way it sounds, the music here, this might be a difficult ask for you because a lot of it is not very like, the beats don't always be knocking here. Like this is again, like I don't even really know what, again, it's kind of like you're like trying to label as a concept album. Labeling this with a genre is like I can call it a lot of things, but I can't, there's nothing that covers all the bases. Like I can't, you can't put this album in a box. It's completely singular.
It's a science fiction soundscape
Yeah.
is where a lot of these sounds and elements of the musicality are coming from. And that's the thing is that this album is ultimately a story about how a guy uses hip hop to overcome the, societal struggles that are weighing down on him. And the band is able to establish his ability to do this by having sharp contrasts of more traditionally structured rap bangers that adopt the sci-fi soundscape, but kind of twist it into a more conventional sense of what we think of when we think of like a West Coast hip hop track. And then you have stuff that's more abstract, like All Black, where you have just these kind of like clicks and beeps and boops and
Hmm.
little synth waves, but never anything, there's no chords on All Black, you know what I mean?
There are a couple songs that like I think, Break the Glass I think is a really good example of a song that like you'll hear that and just be like, "Oh yeah, okay, this kind of goes." But like my favorite song on here, and I'll go a bit Galaxy Brain here just because I have a kind of, it's not a theory, but I guess it's just the interpretation of the album after the last song, because the last song is the moment where, our sci-fi nerds, they also really love 2001: A Space Odyssey. So naturally, this album is going to end with a song that sounds like the fucking portal scene from 2001: A Space Odyssey. Those fucking ELO ass synthesizers at the start of it are just like, and you're just like, again, it's like everything on this album sounds so like dark and dingy and fucking like, cold and desolate. And this just comes through and it's like, again, you really feel like you're looking at a fucking rainbow. And, the narrative conceit of this song is that, like, he's finally getting to, like, go off on the ship. But, like, with all of the pieces of the information that you've mined throughout the album, it's very heavily implied that this is just, like, he's gonna die. Like, it's a suicide mission. Like, he's going into the infinite beyond, but, like, there could be a black hole there and it could swallow him and he could die. And the thing is that this sort of thing of, like, the guy uses hip hop to, escape this terrible calamity and everything is, like, is this even a concept album? Because no, this is just what it's like to be black in America, actually. Because I mean, like, duh. Like, look at it for a second here, and it's less like that is the metaphor here. But also the ending here being that, like, just I have to fight, no matter what, being like that, it always hit me as real poignant. But it also feels like the only album I could ever think of comparing to this is More Mother's The Great Bailout. It's the only album that
Wow.
approaches its topic, subject material with the same kind of sonic aesthetics. And it's of way more academic and way more, no frills with The Great Bailout. But I've thought about that album a lot since I've heard it last year. And I bring it up whenever just because it was such a unique experience for me. But that album going through the actual history of the slave trade and how it evolved into American imperialism is like, this is like a sequel of that. Like, you could listen to these back to back and it would feel like a holistic project, which is fucking nuts. Like, it's again, it's not for everyone, but if you are interested in seeing someone use the tools for hip hop, like legitimately advance the art form, this is where you're gonna look, because I really don't think I've heard anything like this since it came out in 2016.
Yeah, and it feels like it's coming from a refined interest in even musical theater on
Mm-hmm.
David's part, right? Where the songs more explicitly in their construction contribute to the narrative than they would have, say, on the subtitled, right? The
Mm-hmm.
structure of the move from Wake Up to Long Way Away into the True Believer, right? Those
Mm-hmm.
three tracks in particular, I like to use as an example of the way this album is able to combine the kind of old and new stylings of what was ultimately Black protest music, the slave
Mm-hmm.
spirituals of yore and the big rap songs of today, right?
Very
See
similar
those
to
there.
black metal band Zealand Ardor, who popped up around this same time, who would start fusing black metal with soul and slave spirituals. They're again another artist that I associated like them and Backwash and Zealand Ardor of just being like really forward-thinking Afrocentric kind of like art forms and styles that you wouldn't anticipate happening that are really vibrant and really cool to witness. Like they are all in that kind of same area in my headspace of just like legitimately boundary pushing artists that, maybe a lot of people should listen to a little bit more of. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Did you say that A Better Place is your favorite on the album?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
probably.
I think my favorite is actually the one right before it, Baby Don't Sleep,
Ah, it's
which
a
is
great one.
the one most aesthetically in line with the self-titled. Like it's very abrasive and it's very punchy in a lot of ways that songs off of
Baby, don't
Midcity. And
sleep.
yeah, it's punchy and tight in a way that a lot of the songs on Midcity and the self-titled are, which I think is an interesting callback to their old stylings, but it still has that very tactile genre feel of like one of the first sounds that you hear sounds like a heavy cart being rolled down a metal hallway, like
Yeah, yeah, a little bit.
crazy.
A
And
little
they're,
bit.
they've talked a little bit about what they would have to do where they would, spend 3 hours arguing about what the different mechanisms on this spaceship would sound like, slamming doors to laundry machines shut to see if it sounded right, that sort of thing. And I love the scrappy feel of that, right?
Oh,
Their
yeah.
need to create a genre landscape relies on so much ingenuity on their part. And I love hearing that on display in this album because it's ultimately in the service of a very, very, very riveting story.
It also shows just such a disregard for like convention of just being like, it is baked into Clipping's DNA that they do not make concessions for themselves. Like they are going to make what they make and nobody is going to change that. Like the fact that they've been as successful as they have been and they've retained this, I I don't know how they've done it because a lot of people like I mean, obviously they're such beacons of talent and they've found like areas where they can sort of like, oh, we can do score work and David can be on Sesame Street and then we can just sort of use what we want to pursue all our side shit. And that's again, that's living the dream right there. You know, before we leap from an album to I think that this is sort of a phase that I think of being on its own, and then there's a sort of the final phase of their
Is this a good
career.
time to talk about the odds and ends that we
The
mentioned?
the odds and ends, but also one thing that I think I didn't mention this beforehand, but Jen, you have seen Blindspotting, haven't you?
Yes, yes, I
Okay.
fucking love
I
Blindspotting.
do want to shout out. Well, I mean, first of all, I guess this will just be our recommend. If you haven't seen Blindspotting, fucking go. Because everybody who is listening this far in a video about clipping, then Blindspotting is for you. It is one of my favorite films of the 2010s, and it stars David and Rafael Casal, and they have a companion EP to this movie of them performing songs in character. And it's great. Like David's in particular is phenomenal shit. I would one of my favorite movie endings ever maybe is Blindspotting's. It's the confrontation in the garage
Yeah,
scene
yeah,
of
yeah.
like if you want to see David put forward every skill he has, turn it up to 11, look at this scene because this is like one of the most intensely like this should have been his Oscar clip as far as I'm concerned. But I won't go into the context or anything because it's a huge spoiler, but there is a climax that involves him actually performing a freestyle that is just fucking enrapturing. Like to like I get chills thinking about it, frankly. It is a great little movie that is a wonderful little like examination of gentrification, but also like friendship in the context of gentrification and how it brings different kinds of people together and also creates really unique sort of erases boundaries between people that make things really complicated. It's about just having like every relationship in Blindspotting is very innately complicated by racial barriers, by economic barriers, or whatever. But the movie is also just fucking funny. The whole movie
It is
is just
so
so
funny,
fun.
dude. There's a whole part. If you want an example of how funny this movie is, there's a scene towards the middle where these guys are hustlers, right? Not
Hmm.
hustlers by trade. They have a day job, but they need to
Yeah.
hustle. So they buy a bunch of flat irons, or they get a bunch of flat irons from David's
Yeah.
character's
Yeah.
mom, and take them to the neighborhood salon to sell them. And you see Rafael Casal's character get in this like what would I compare it to? I would almost compare it to like the compliment battle from like Sorry to Bother You.
Yeah.
Feels in a similar vein, where both of them are just like trying to out like he's trying to bullshit her, she's trying to see through it, and
Hmm.
it just keeps going and going and escalating in tension, and it's hilarious. And it ends,
Eventually evolving into Shamal Knight.
yeah, it evolves into one of my favorite line deliveries ever, which is, and fuck Alfred Hitchcock and M. Shamal Knight.
Oh fuck, man. It's like that's a movie that's got like really, it's got really intense dramatic shit in it, but it's also just like a really great hangout movie. In that respect, I throw it back to Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing a lot, in that it's like it's got, heavy shit in it, particularly the ending, but most of it is just colorful and fun and insightful, and you're just witnessing characters in this very well-defined environment. And also, if you're a hip hop head, they do freestyles throughout the entire movie of just like back and forth and back and forth. One of the best scenes in the entire movie is David and his friend who are like, they move shit out of the places that are being moved out in Oakland. And he's inside this old house and just kind of quietly freestyling to himself as he observes all of these things that are like clearly objects and memories that are associated with an experience that is just not here anymore of just like a family lived here and like he'll just kind of use that and it's like oh it's a great little central metaphor. It's almost like what he's doing in Splendor and Misery, like there's a lot going on here that like if you want to follow David's trajectory as an artist, I feel like that is essential to it because Blindspotting feels like an extension of clipping. Like not just because hip hop and guy, but like it feels like a movie about coping mechanisms to make it through the shit. And clipping is what if the shit was harsh noise?
Yeah, it helps that David wrote the movie, right? The fact that it lines up
Yes.
with that ethos is that him and Rafael Casal are the writers, right? This is their story. So it's very
Hmm.
much in line with the sensibilities that drive a lot of Clipping's music. And I want
That
to use this as
fucking
a,
can I just mention that the like I think maybe one of the lines that has stung me the most in however long I've been watching the movies is the come on, say it scene. That
oh
shit
yeah.
is like I watch that and I'm like I gotta put my head in my hands. I feel like such dog shit right now, bro. Like it's rough stuff. So like, prepare but also like give that movie love. Not enough people saw it.
Yes, give that movie love. I want to use this as a segue to talk about the odds and ends that come
Yes.
in around the late 2010s, early 2020s for clipping. This isn't going to be entirely within the chronology of the albums. We're going to talk about a couple things that come after the next album, but I just want to
Hmm.
get them out of the way and kind of do them together. So first, I want to talk about the Face EP,
Hmm.
which this was a collection of remixes of a song of theirs that they had been performing since the Midcity era. If you go back
Yeah.
to that KEXP performance I mentioned earlier, you'll even see them perform that there and like do a big call and response number with the crowd. It's a big
It's
live
great.
hit for them. And so they finally put out an EP that has their version of it. It's got a few remixes of it from people like JPEG Mafia, a couple
Hmm.
other producers as well have their take on it. Very good collection, a very for the fans moment of let's finally get this, third verse of Friends in Low Places part of our oeuvre out for
Yeah,
everybody to
yeah.
hear. And then next, we have The Deep, which starts off as
Uh-huh.
a song and then expands into a three-track EP. And The Deep is a really interesting project because it
Yeah.
feels very in line with what Splendor and Misery is doing with its narrative approach, in that The Deep literally starts with a kind of Greek chorus saying, let me get the first part of it up. Our mothers are pregnant, sorry. Our mothers were pregnant African women thrown overboard while crossing the Atlantic Ocean on slave ships. We were born breathing water as we did in the womb. We built our home on the sea floor, unaware of the two-legged surface dwellers, until their world came to destroy ours. With cannons, they searched for oil beneath our cities. Their greed and recklessness forced our uprising. Tonight we remember. And the whole song is David's rendition of this kind of act of remembrance that they're taking part in. It's
It's really like kind of like just beautiful. Like it's genuinely something that they make, and it's just like this has the appeal of a clipping project to be sure, but it also just really leans in on that narrative conceit, and also like I mean, the idea merely of just reclaiming a what is essentially a Lovecraft story and then twisting it in this ingenious way is like, again, that is what I love so much about modern horror is, you can take the pieces from the past and just be like, you had a lot of bullshit. Let's put it something better here anyway. And then they do, and it's like that's perfect, and it makes for a really unique chapter in their discography of just like exploring this one horror centric idea that, I mean, like, even other horrorcore-ish things are not going to go this fucking nerdy and strange, being like, yeah, here's my fucking Bloodborne EP. Like, what? Yes.
There's even
Absolutely.
there's even a novella based on this song that the guys co-wrote with this author, River Solomon.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Fuck.
that came out in 2019, around the same time as the song. So it explores that concept a little bit further in a more literary sense. I still need to read it. I got to find a copy of
Yeah, I
this.
mean, shit, me too. Oh, and fucking there's a feature on here that's very sort of quintessentially 2010s and like kind of indie, and that being Shabazz Palaces, a project who they kind of really made waves with like a first album that I really love, like great album. And then they kind of petered off a little bit, but their showcase here, great, fantastic. Love that they worked with clipping, like absolute alchemy, beautiful stuff.
Right. The second track on the EP, Aqua Code Data Breaks, which has that feature on it. It's it takes some more like if a story like this was on the self-titled, this is probably what it would sound like of like
Hmm.
playing more into traditional hip hop delivery and trying to get this aesthetic and this narrative across. It's not as
Hmm.
effective as the title track, but it's so much fun.
It's so
It's a
cool.
really fun song. It doesn't lose any of that luster of like this concept of we are our own people and we were born from this suffering, but we've been able to make our kind of ecosystem that's separate from all the suffering that came afterwards. So like
Hmm.
we're balling.
Yeah, it's cool shit. Like even when they do something that's minor, they just put the utmost thought into it. Like so many artists I can picture this just being primo throwaway material, and they're like, no, 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 no. Every release going like even like since fucking the self-titled, like every release is so sharply refined. They have yet to repeat themselves in basically any way, like aside from the fact that they have releases that have kind of been split up, but we'll get there when we get there.
I want to talk about one more song that came out in 2020 that's actually not on Spotify. You got to dig it up.
Yeah, yeah,
You got to dig it
yeah.
up a little bit. It's called
Hmm.
Chapter 319, released on Juneteenth of 2020, hence
Hmm.
the number in the title. Chapter 319 is basically a protest song about
Hmm.
the Black Lives Matter protests of the summer of 2020 that ends with the line that took TikTok by storm at the time. Donald Trump is
Donald
a white
Trump is a white
supremacist,
supremacist.
full stop. If you vote for him again, you're a white supremacist, full
Full
stop.
stop. Which that even like I know that kind of even rubbed some people who agree with that sentiment the wrong way, but I mean, especially in hindsight now, like can you really like is there even an argument anymore that this was not like saying the quiet part loud wasn't necessary? Because if you want to make that argument, I refer you to the point that David just said something 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 you're a white supremacist. Like I fucking like what are you here for? What are you here for, man? If you're not here to hear this, what are you here for?
Yeah, and so this song was also, I live in Louisville, so I got to shout this out. This song was also dedicated to Breonna Taylor. There's a
Hmm.
shout out to her in there. So that for me at the time, while
Big.
this city was going through it, was big.
And so that clipping song coming very soon after this incident was just kind of like, I've never felt like, and again, this song is not for people like Jen and I, but at the same time, I've never been hit where it hurts in, home before like that. So I felt a deep kind of kinship with when that song came out, just because it was like I was pissed and I needed a vehicle for being pissed, and that was that song.
Mm. So big ups to chapter 319. Give it a listen if you haven't. Even if even if none of this matters to you. If you're still watching this fucking video, give chapter 319 a listen.
Makes for a great double listen with the Denzel Curry song Pig Feet.
Yes.
Also another song that boy that hard. Those are again two songs I have very closely associated in my head. So,
Yes. Now, back to the main output. We are getting
mhm.
to 2019's. Well, we said we were going to do this. So between 2019 and 2020, we get two clipping albums that
We
are
get
essentially one album split into two parts. The first one on the left on Jake's screen there, there existed an addiction to blood. And the second one, the one on the right, which is, I also have my shirt on, visions of bodies being burned, are two horrorcore albums, clipping trying out a new genre, new set of stylings, new approach to their writing. Let me ask you this, because I had gotten into clipping a couple years after Splendor and Misery, so this was my first
mhm,
experience seeing a rollout of theirs full
was
time.
mine too.
What was your, how was that for you? What was your response to the rollout for the first album?
Fucking core memory for me fucking is that what happens is that because of the way Sub Pop puts out clippings albums, they'll hold a listening party stream for them very early, which means they always get leaked very quickly, might I add. Which I have a theory is
They
probably
like
on
that.
purpose. Like, I mean, like they know how what they're doing and how to market themselves. And again, if these albums are anything to go by, it clearly worked. Because I got this album, I think 3 months ahead of time. I downloaded the leak because I was just like, I'm probably gonna get this on vinyl, which so I had no reticence about it, even though I'm pretty sure it was only in 129 kilobytes per second. But whatever. Gives it a kind of a homespun kind of gritty feel to
Crunchy
listen in
feel.
lesser, yeah,
Mhm.
lesser audio quality kind of. But I got a hold of it, and I just remember being like, since I was the only one who like really got access to it, I just remember listening to it over and over again. I was at my retail job at the time, and I was like, "You guys aren't ready." You guys aren't fucking ready for this shit, man. This is so fucking heat because this album begins with I will tentatively call it my favorite clipping song, Nothing is Safe.
Wow.
Because this song is like okay, David and the boys were like, "All right, what if we made a John Carpenter movie a hip hop song? And we had John Carpenter synths, and we had the fucking Halloween piano, the ding, 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 ding. And then we made it basically like the plot of fucking Assault on Precinct 13, and it is just this depiction of these people holed up in this place, guns strapped, like paranoia, all that shit. Somebody gets hit with a bullet, everybody starts freaking out, and like the whole time David's got this very calm, very steady flow as that little plink 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 goes along, and it's like the really subtle backing production is just slowly sort of building. And then you get the crescendo in this song, which begins with the line of a man with a golden halo that could be the sun, and then the fucking enormous synthesizer just blah, and you're like, whoa! It is the biggest fucking pop off in like this whole discography, and I absolutely love it. Like the imagery so vivid, you're so firmly entrenched in the moment in that song, and I remember I was just like, this is like the hardest an album has immediately gripped me in so fucking long. And the nuts thing about this record is that it just does nothing but hit. Like, this is them, I feel like, operating at a level that, I mean, this is peak performance, frankly. This is them being, they are so finely honed in on the slasher movie or classic 80s horror vibes that they're executing, but they're also twisting and putting some shit together that's totally unlike what they've done before. You have He Dead After Nothing Is Safe with that fucking Ed Balloon feature, which, like, that is such a bizarre song. And I find every part of it infinitely fucking catchy. I can't tell you how many times Morgan have I just been going, like, we'll see somebody die in a movie and go, oh, he dead. Like,
This is
exactly like
where
the hook.
we mentioned this earlier, but this is where clipping really starts to get perfect features all across the board. You've got Ed Balloon, you've got Counterfeit Madison on shit.
Bro, all in your
Counterfeit
head.
Madison on All in Your Head. My favorite clipping song is also on this album.
I wonder.
That's
I wonder if it's my second favorite because I have both of my favorites are on here.
and that is La Mala Ordina.
Oh God, that's a close bronze, close bronze.
Y'all know I love a good posse cut, and
Mm.
this is Clipping's take on a posse cut as an absolute
I'm
horror
from that
show.
hood where we beat rappers.
As an absolute horror show that even the hardest rappers are not prepared to enter.
Yeah, it's
Right?
just like, oh, you think you're real? Oh, that's funny. You got notions. Like it's so like it is so cold, so ruthless. Everybody on here is just like, oh, and then it ends with that fucking hideous blast of noise. Like, ugh,
It goes on
that
for like
shit's
two
cold.
minutes.
It's so fucking loud, but you're just like, yep, this is where I am. This is what I'm sitting in, man. Let's go for it. And the fact that you get my second favorite clipping song immediately after that transition, which is hands down the most intense song they've ever made, Club Down.
Club down,
This
man.
is like this is the most horrifying imagery David has ever put into a song. Just talking about like babies with colic screaming and dogs barking and fucking like mold growing in apartments, and it's just like ramps up the intensity and the fucking like it's just you feel like you need to run when you hear this song. You're like I need help. Please God, someone save me. It's so good, man. So good.
Yeah, no. And what I love about Clipping's approach to horror is just how multifaceted it is across the two records. Like just on this one, you've got, the Carpenter score on Nothing Is Safe, but they even go outside of horror but bring in sonic elements to kind of accentuate the horror. Like La Mala Ordina is named after an Italian crime movie named The Italian Connection. And it's their tribute to not just the Italian Connection, but a bunch of other like really grimy, really violent Italian cop movies from the 70s around the same time that we were seeing stuff like, the French Connection and Cruising over here.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff that really showed the you know, post Dragnet, post Andy Griffith Show reality of police in
Uh-huh.
this country and in all countries, frankly. That also feels very in line with, Giallo, but Italian Connection is in a kind of different aesthetic angle, and that's what they're chasing with La Mala Ordina. But then you've got Run for Your Life.
Oh man, the beat on this, man. How do they fucking do this shit,
One
dude?
of my favorite examples of clippings sound, which is a lot of like field noise and a lot of ethereal kind of twitches and growls and scratches against like hard surfaces that don't sound like anything in particular. Like they all sound kind of warped. But then,
Hey,
as the
oh.
song goes on, you start to hear you're following a guy who's being pursued by
Hmm.
somebody who is coming after him, and then you hear a car drive by, and there's a beat playing out of the car. This very like, I mean, fuck, it sounds like Slob on My Knob. Like it's
Basically.
just like it just sounds like 3 6 Mafia playing out of a car driving
Run
by.
for your life.
But that is the sign that it's game over, right? You
Hmm.
feel like you're being chased, hearing this car go by, hearing this echo, and then LeChat's little interjections over the chorus are a
Hmm.
perfect setup for her verse, where she is a great example of how a guest verse is able to kind of eschew David's writing rules and still make a very good song that fits into their oeuvre because
Oh
she comes
yeah.
in and she's playing a character. I mean that in
Yes.
the best way possible for what this project
It's
is
so
and what
camp,
clipping is
man.
doing.
It's
It's
so good.
really campy, right? It's the even though she says it's the chat, the killer, murderer, bitch they love to hate, the way that she goes all the way down to, boosting up the murder rate. Hannibal Lecter your
She
face. Like she's
she
having
sounds
fun.
exactly like Megan the Stallion. Like it's genuinely kind of uncanny. She sounds like it sounds like fucking like Cobra from last year, basically. It's the same fucking like
Yeah.
intonation and flow, but like she's got a bite behind her that you can't fucking replicate. It's so good.
And then, God, I feel this is probably the one we're gonna spend the most time talking about because
Oh, for sure. I
I'm
mean,
going through the track list. I'm just like, oh, we gotta talk about that one. Oh, fuck, we
uh-huh.
gotta talk about that one. So let's just go in order. Because what's after
The
Run
show.
for
The
Your Life?
show is the one where we kind of get into the voyeurism, but also leaning heavily into Saw, leaning heavily
Yes.
into the idea of, entertainment and violence for mass consumption, for you to witness, which is already kind of poking fun at it with you listening to a clipping album, but it's also sort of inviting the meta narrative of the guy who shows up to the horror show to see something fucked up, who pays money to see some fucking poor person get ripped apart or something like that. It's really intense and nasty in a way that they've only been since like Body and Blood, a song that just is about like sinew and tissue and blood and guts, and you're just kind of like you're forced to revel in that and see how disgusting it is. And when you go through the fucking like we mentioned that it's camp occasionally, and then they straight up have like a 50s B movie horror intro just being like this woman just being like, "Doctor, like it sounds like MF Doom. He's just like, I
Yeah.
don't know what to do with all of these visions. It's like, please sit over here on the chair and make yourself comfortable. It's so good.
The only thing that makes me hesitate with like fully endorsing this is that it comes in between pretty self-serious explorations of these
Oh yeah,
concepts, especially like possession is very campy and then leading
oh
into
yeah,
Open Your Head, which is not campy at all. It feels a little bit abrasive,
definitely, definitely.
but possession is very funny. And if I'm in the right mood, I think it just fits perfectly, especially if I'm still in the more sadistic mood from the show. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I'm kind of riding on the perverse wave that this album kind of really drives home in its final stretch. Like, and you go into Blood of the Fang after that, which is like up until recently, I would actually say that this is the best written clipping song. Like, I heard this and you immediately like again, you get the more mother effect of just like, "Oh boy, time to sit down and listen to some theory, kids." Like like it's got that aspect to it, but again, it's about the viscera. This is where you get the title drop too of, there existed an addiction to blood
Which do you
and
know
like
what these samples are
working
from?
what now?
Do you know what these samples are from on this song?
No, I don't actually.
I've never done this to you on the podcast.
Yes.
I've never been
I
like
love
you
being on
about
the other
songs.
side.
But so these both there existed an addiction to blood and the girl choir voices that are played throughout the chorus are taken from the soundtrack to Ganja and Hess, which is a late 70s vampire movie by a guy named, his last name is escaping me.
Is it
So I'm
Italian?
going to look it up so I don't get it wrong. Ba, 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 ba. Ganja and Hess is directed by a guy named Bill Gunn, and it stars Dwan Jones of Night of the Living Dead fame
Right.
as, yeah,
Right.
as an anthropologist who becomes a vampire after he's attacked by his assistant with a cursed like dagger. And so that movie very much treats vampirism as an involuntary thing that leads to like an addiction cycle in the same way that Romero would do a few years later with Martin. But obviously, the addiction comes in very different cultural contexts, right? A lot of the gothic of both of these movies comes in the form of like deviant bodies and deviant sexualities, both of which these movies kind of fall under. But the
Hmm.
use of the soundtrack here is really interesting because the by the Christians it is written, that part in the intro is
There
from a kind of,
existed an addiction to blood, blood, blood.
yeah, it's taken from a kind of interlude scene in the movie where we get this kind of orator telling the history of the African nation where this vampirism comes from. So
Hmm.
that's a historical precedent that, the song is able to use very well. And then the chorus of, singing girls singing the African chant that plays throughout the hook is also taken from the film, and it's used as a leitmotif to symbolize the characters, or at least this is how I interpret it, to symbolize the characters' like weakness in the face of this compulsion to feast on human flesh. And so hearing it in that context in this song makes a lot of sense to me. But
No, yeah.
the symbolic meaning of it is twisted a little bit because the story that's being told in Blood of the Fang is basically, what if all these black revolutionaries who were killed, taken out of the game early, came back from the dead as vampires and got shit going again? Huey Newton, Assata Shakur,
Hmm.
who else comes in on that third verse? Malcolm X, right? Emery, Afeni, Kathleen Cleaver. Everybody is back from the dead and everybody's starting to get ready to fuck shit up again. And so you
It's a
better
song that is
be ready.
motivating them to be like, let's fucking go.
Yeah, it's almost
Boom.
it's a summoning of the revolutionaries of the past and a critique of some of the revolutionaries of the present. Malcolm told you by any means, why y'all talking about all on the same team? Um, Queen Angela told y'all grasp at the root. Why y'all talking about hands up, don't shoot? I'm belaboring these because I want to get it across to people who may not be familiar with this, that like this is a manifesto of
It
Black
truly is.
Revolution
And it's
filtered
bad
through a
fucking
genre.
ass.
Yeah, filtered through a genre lens, and it's just also a song that kicks fucking ass.
It was precisely at that moment where I was just like, no, like we've hit a new standard for clipping. And like after Blood of the Fang, we get the continuation of the story series, which is this really like again, super vivid narrative about this woman discovering that her boyfriend cheated on her, but it turns out that maybe there was more going on than her boyfriend cheating on her actually. And then there's just kind of a rabbit hole that happens that eventually, well, it ends with vampires and, well, actually, vampire or werewolf. I'm actually not certain about that.
There's a reference to Howling at the Moon that's making me
Yeah,
lean toward werewolf, but
yeah.
that also ends with, so this is the last story song.
Hmm.
They only made one story song for these two albums because they thought it was all going to be released at once. And there's no story song on Dead Channel Sky, which I think is interesting. Maybe
Interesting.
they're just done with this.
They could be.
David did kind of express being tired of the work it took him to make these stories
Well,
stay in continuity.
especially when this, double album that got split in half, which, by the way, we're not just treating it like that because we want to and because there's overriding aesthetic similarities. Like, that was the plan, like, originally, but the label was like, we can't do that. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess a group of clipping size releasing a big double album is probably financially unviable. So, I mean, it sucks to suck, is what it is, but we'll treat it like one thing personally because that's kind of what we do. That said, all we had for 2 years was this. And if I hone in on what my favorite singular clipping release is, and that like what I just get the most out of one single listen to, it's There Existed an Addiction to Blood. I say that because I want to drive home how good I think this album is, because it was I I don't want to say immediately overshadowed, but it basically was, because like the moment Visions came out, everybody was like, whoa! And
Yeah,
like,
and I
don't
feel
get me
like that.
wrong, I feel the exact same way, but as a result, it feels like There Existed Addiction to Blood kind of got being like, oh, it's great, but it's not quite as good. And I'm like, oh, but what if it is actually as good? Actually, hmm?
I think they are. They're good for me. I get very different appeals out of them. I find There Existed an Addiction to Blood a lot tighter in its and
Yes.
a lot more consistent in its sonic qualities.
Hmm.
Visions is a lot more exploratory and goes in a
I agree.
lot of different directions.
Which
And
is why viewing
I
them as a
like
whole thing
almost
is better.
yeah, I like almost all of them, but as when you view that singularly, it has less of a finished feeling to
Hmm.
it than There Existed does, where it feels like you didn't even need visions to make There Existed an Addiction to Blood work, and you kind of need to set that precedent for visions to work. And I feel like that's also kind of what helps the reception of visions be so good, is that we got those two albums so fast back to back. So everybody had time to be like, oh, there's this important sequel, right? It felt like it had this elevated status to it because of the first album
Hmm.
that made there kind of be a disparaging view of the two as like, oh, they immediately top themselves with the sequel. I'm like,
Yeah.
one, I don't know if we should be talking about it that way in the first place, and two, I'm not sure if that's true anyway.
Yeah, okay. I'm glad we're on the exact same wavelength there, because I do view that as the tighter listening to me. That's why I've come back to it. But that is my very long-winded way of saying that I basically think this is the greatest hip hop double album of all time. In that, like, it immediately we get a lateral move that's just a if it was good in the exact same way there existed an addiction to blood would be, I would think that would be a detriment. The fact that it expands in scope to me is like, that's what it's supposed to do. Like
Yeah,
that, if you don't have the gradual evolution, you do miss something key about the project, especially sonically. Because I think, I mean, it's difficult just because they are frequently so exploratory, but I would certainly say that I think Visions of Bodies Being Burned is the most sonically out there thing they have. I was the thing I heard where the beats most consistently made me go, what?
it's got the biggest variety of
Hmm.
sounds that contribute to these songs, you
For
know,
sure.
and the intro itself is a stark contrast from the previous one, where the first one is very understated. It's got this kind of like lo-fi VHS filter over David's voice. But the second one on Visions starts with this like Godzilla stomping and that loud kind of hurried pursuing. It sounds like, basically their take on the Evil Dead first person point of view shot, what that sounds
Yeah.
like. Uh,
That
they do
sound
that.
effect that plays at the end of like all the intros of the new clipping stuff where it sounds like a bunch of like really high sped up screaming. I love that as a little like signature watermark thing that they're doing now,
Yeah,
basically to
yeah, yeah.
start all of their projects.
Yeah. And then it goes into this is the one that has the most explicit, like, this song is about this movie as opposed to the
Uh-huh.
previous one. We start with Say the Name, which is their take on Candyman. Uh,
Candyman and Rosemary's Baby.
and Rosemary's Baby. What do you think about Say the Name? This is the
Uh,
first
this
single. So how
this
did you
was
react to this one when it
one of
dropped?
our favorite songs of 2020 when we made that list, and yeah, that hadn't fucking changed a bit. This thing is them pulling out the like, you know how we can kind of make people mosh real hard? Let's do that again, because man, Say the Name is just some fucking like, the that repetition, the candlesticks in the dark, visions of bodies being burned, candlesticks in the dark.
That
Like
fucking
that
Ghetto Boys sample, man.
mantra is just fucking perfect. That sort of repeated refrain. And then you've got David with that fucking those sticky ass deliveries he's got where he's just like 9 months later got the stomach full of devil baby. Like he enunciates so fucking hard on songs like this because
Yeah.
it's like the LP effect where it's like you need to hear every syllable very concisely spoken because it is woven into the rhythm of the song. And that shit is great. And it ends with, again, it's like both of these albums start off with a moment where you just end like, like it feels like Indiana Jones fucking like, oh fuck, my eyes are on fire kind of shit, and that rules. I love how they basically, again, they weave the two classic horror stories together, Candyman being an absolute sort of must here, but then also the Rosemary's Baby, and it feels like it graduates from going like, feeling like it has the scale of a horror movie to feeling apocalyptic by the end of it. Like the by the end of it, it feels like you are like ground floor part of a cult that is resurrecting like a fucking cabin in the woods end of the movie giant that is going to wreck the universe. It's awesome. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's great. Then we got the second single, 96 Nev Campbell. What movie is this based on? No, I'm being facetious. I love 96 Nev Campbell. I think it's great. And
Came in China, man.
I
Mm.
love the witchboard interlude that goes into it. I wish it was just part of the song. If
Yeah.
you have, because it's not on the vinyl, right? Is it on your
Yeah,
pressing
it is.
vinyl?
I think there are two like intros on the vinyl that are not there. Uh, just because just because I think they are too long because of the, oh, we didn't mention that the first part of the this album technically ends with a how long? 15, 20 minute noise
18.
piece? 18-minute noise piece of a piano on fire. Which is the thing I was talking about being like, yeah, I don't exactly listen to this every time I listen to There Existed because I don't think you're supposed to.
No, I
But
mean, it
that
is an established tradition, right? The piano burning
Yes.
is a
And
performance
that
piece.
idea will be the one actual like improvement I think that Visions does make is that their version of this is way smarter and way better integrated into the album.
I think it works better in retrospect looking at these two holistically, at the piano burning as a deliberately long interlude
Hmm.
to still kind of separate the two sides of the project without it completely feeling like, oh, they're separate things that should be considered on completely different terms. Like, no, the piano burning is just as much an ending of There Existed an Addiction to Blood as it is an introduction to Visions, even with the
Yes.
actual introduction to Visions. It's like an interlude to a two-act play. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. And I mean fucking that sense of scale that they graduate to at the end of Say the Name, it feels like that's something that they echo a couple of times because the sonic palettes here are so wide. They're so spacious on here that eventually they get up to some like Philip Glass ass shit with the sound design on here that's like really fucking ambitious. Like, I mean, straight up sound collage on songs like fucking Looking
She
Like Meat.
Bad.
And there's She Bad, which also has like the again, that's another fucking clipping femme fatale song, but also like that may even be the song where they lean the hardest into that shit, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
like,
It's more
there's,
so, I think of it more so as their Femme Fatale song in this entry because I think of their Femme Fatale songs as being entirely told by David, Even when
mm-hmm.
they have ones where, the bad bitch in question makes an appearance, it
She
doesn't feel the
bad though.
same.
She
Yeah, it doesn't
bad
feel the
though.
same as Body and Blood, where David is able to kind of abstract the concept
Mm-hmm.
of his character a bit, like on She Bad.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and like the something underneath is another one where that scale gets echoed, and it's just like you legitimately feel like you're watching some being rise from the earth gradually until it like shakes, and you're just like fuck. And you've got Make Them Dead, which sounds like fucking mystical. Like there's just something fucking eerie about this fucking song that like those harmonies, the dead, like
Yeah.
that really sells that
Yeah.
shit.
It's straight
So
up
good.
it's straight up power electronics about a death cult forcing Jesus freaks to walk off a cliff.
So, oh, it's so sick. And like that sort of again, we get some great song conceits here with shit like Pain Every Day, which to me that's one of the most like sharp and incisive things I think that they've ever written, like as a statement against police violence. That hits hard. I think the moment I think about the most from this album is just the officer with his brains blown out.
That's a different song, man. That's
Or
different.
shit, yeah, that's right. That's
That's
right. That's
later.
fucking
That's later. But no,
that is
you're
later.
right.
But
You're right in pointing that sentiment to Pain Every Day as
mhm.
well. Because for me, the line on that one that really resonates with this idea of like this kind of aspirational quality of black suffering being able to haunt the future and create change. Um,
Mm.
true because you bled out doesn't mean you ever left, and that's that shit. Right.
Ooh,
You were never going to be
that's
forgotten for better for worse.
I
So
mean,
you might as well
when
make it work in the afterlife.
they know how to make a poignant line stick. And as far as character portraits go in songs, gotta say, I think my favorite comes in with Check the Lock. I love,
Yeah.
love, love this song so much. You get the perfect sort of portrayal of this really sort of,
This
you
is where it
know,
feels the most camp, right?
oh,
Is
for
check the
sure.
lock.
Like there's the main character's like a guy, with like a criminal history, but like and he's constantly terrified of that, his past actions coming back to haunt him, or just the general idea of when you're in the criminal underworld, you're there forever and you have to look over and watch over your back because otherwise you could just get killed and die. And that paranoia slowly like sucks away at all of his identity and eventually becomes all he is. And man, when that fucking beat comes in on the verse, oh shit, man. It's so good. Like this is another one of those clipping songs where it's just like, nah, this one's good for the car, man. This one's just like, yeah.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
looking
It
like
also feels like
meat.
it feels the most in line with 90s hip hop because you got, the gin and juice reference. And it's also,
Oh yeah, that's right. They are very meta-referential in a way that feels very honest to their roots of the genre. Like whenever they incorporate something, it feels like way more than just a, hey, shout out to guy I like. It's always very contextual. It always serves a very specific purpose. Like it's, this is the kind of guy that would be listening to a song like this. Like it's
yeah.
very informative as to what's going on.
It's what I love about all the homages on Splendor and Misery too, because it reflects that ethos of, the character trying to use what he knows to drive him forward when he's, referencing Hail Mary by Tupac and all these
Mm-hmm.
other things. And even the computer doing that too a little bit as the story goes on. But anyway, back to after Check the Lock, we get probably my I don't know. This is a particularly weak stretch for me between looking
Mm.
like meat and eating alive. I like what's going on here sonically, but they just don't hit in the same way as some of the other songs on the album. And the feature from Horror on Looking Like Meat has definitely grown on me.
Mm-hmm.
That was the thing that initially made me be like, I don't think I like this very much. And it's a little
Yeah, I can see.
redundant. It's a pretty weak hook, but they're doing something there with like, oh, you look good enough to eat, doing that whole like parental language as like
Mm-hmm.
a
It
predatory rhetoric. It's an
You
interesting linguistic
feel
shift.
really uncomfortable, like in a way that I'm very sure is intentional, but it's also just kind of like, I actually kind of don't like listening to the second half of this song very much. Like,
It just, I
okay.
don't know. It's a good song, but it doesn't hit the same. And I kind of feel the same about Eaten Alive, even though I like the understated nature of the production with
Yes.
the like echoed growls of "Don't you step up in the swamp."
Yeah.
It just goes on too long.
For
Uh,
I had this problem when the album came out, and that is kind of my only sticking point. That I love the sound collage idea of this, and I think it is effective. It's just that with the specific delivery that's being used here, 5.5 minutes is really long. Like, I think maybe, trim this back by maybe a minute and a half and you have a much more, incisive final leg. I'll definitely agree. That said, the album really picks back up in that
yes.
final stretch. Like, wow, does it pick back up?
So we got Body for the Pile, which is actually not written for this album.
No, it wasn't.
It was written for a project for Adult Swim, where Adult Swim was just
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
we want to make a compilation album under our brand with a bunch of noise music, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what they wrote it for. But it's another one of those describing a setting songs,
Mm-hmm.
a triptych, even in the same way as Bullshit is. But it's about the deaths
The
of three police
the line I
officers.
mentioned earlier. Whew. And let me tell you, listening to this song in 2021, I'll just say it's cathartic.
And it's but no, it's another one of those great, like they literally just describe empty rooms with a dead body in it.
Yep.
And just the
It's
way that David is able to flow through every one of these details. Between this and enlacing, he finds two different ways to describe the way that light looks when it's being
I
putting
love those
through blinds
lines.
in windows.
Oh,
And
I
that kind
love
of shit,
love that shit.
that just it's what I love about writing. not just what I love about hip hop. It's what I love about writing.
No, I mean like, and it clearly David likes that too, because this is far from the only time they've done shit like that. But again, that just like that very granular, really specific observational thing that's like, it really just feels like I don't hear any other music in general that comments on shit like this. Like there's hip hop feels very uniquely attuned to describe very singular phenomena because of how, frank it can be, but like once you inject the kind of linguistic edge that David has, he's able to put things in a way that make you really look at something completely different. Like I mean, you straight up might be appreciating the beauty of some shit because you hear some lines on this and be like, "Oh, wow, that's a little simple kind of thing." And like, I don't know, it's particularly powerful and poignant, especially when it's contextualized with something horrible.
Yeah, yeah. Well, just the way that he describes, I'm gonna go to that second verse that you mentioned, like um just the sinister nature of describing a water pitcher, right?
Ah,
Um, the lipstick left on one appears to smile wide, and the slanted blinds are squinting just enough for sunrise to zebra stripe the room with light. He would have had to shield his eyes, but they wide open. No, no,
oh,
no, he
fuck.
never flinched.
And that's again that deliver like he's so dexterous in his ability to deliver. Like there's so many people like you listen to some rappers and no matter how good they are, they might start repeating flows. They might start doing it. It's like David is fucking rubber. This man bounces around like nothing else. There are times where you're listening to clipping songs and you're like, wait a minute, is that the feature or is that him? And then you got to do like a little bit in your brain and be like, oh no, okay, that's him.
I mean, it does help that David's main mode of production is like very fast 4/4, very fast 16ths,
Mm-hmm.
right? The speed at which he's regularly operating makes it um, easier for some instances where his flow may be more similar to the ones on other songs to like not feel as redundant, because
Well,
he's clearly putting in so much breath work all the time.
oh, and that contrast comes in heavy when you move into shit like in lacing, where everything is like where the vibe is kind of distinctly more like you lay it back a little bit, but you still dial up the intensity a lot. And in lacing is what we referred to it being kind of the level up of a previous clipping song, whereas this one's kind of there's just this fucking stream of consciousness description of losing your mind and basically overdosing on drugs while you're in the club and you think you're just, you do a shot of DMT or whatever the fuck and then you're just like, yeah, party, but like no, you're fucking dead now. And the way that it evolves and like the questions that David's character will continually ask himself is just like, now your face is on your face. This is something you should face. Like it's so good. It's so immersive. Like you can picture it so perfectly in your head.
This one of my favorite clipping songs, no doubt. Just the
For
way
sure.
it's a complete departure for them sonically, and I
I mean, it's
really
trap,
appreciate it.
straight up.
Yeah, yeah. It's trap. It's psychedelic trap.
And
Like
like
they're
to the point
operating in
where
a
I really hope they revisit this sound again. Like
I do
it's really
too.
good.
We didn't get anything that we got something that sounds a little bit closer to trap on Dead Channel Sky, which we'll talk about.
That's
But
very
nothing
true.
like this.
Yeah.
Nothing like
Yes.
in Lacing. It's I want to hear
Nah.
I almost don't want to hear more of that because this song feels special to me because of it, you
You're
know?
very right. It really is the haymaker at the end of it all. Just like this is the only song you could feel like it's the only one with the gravitas to be like, and here's where we're at. And then, of
Yeah.
course, we move into the music piece, which is a composition originally, an experimental composition by Yoko Ono that is reinterpreted through the boys at Clipping, which makes this like coming out of it. And it is literally a like ray of light. You're walking outside, you're free from all of it. Like, and let me tell you, this piece hits if you listen to this as one record. Like, if you listen
Yeah.
to the whole thing all the way through, you really do feel like you're stepping out of the muck and you're like, oh, man, that was fun, but also maybe I'm a little done for a while because like Club Down was like an hour ago and I was pretty shook then.
Yeah, no, it's the perfect denouement, right? Knowing the
Yeah.
context of Secret Piece, knowing that it is meant to be like it's very particularly worded. Like you play a certain note over a recording of a sunset, not
Hmm.
necessarily out while looking at the sunset. So I remember they were doing an interview with Fantano where they talked about like asking somebody that they know who literally just travels around the world that does field recordings of sunrises, just listen to a bunch of them to try to find one that fit what they were going for. It's really great. I really, really like it.
Oh yeah.
And now it's time for a new clipping album.
Boy, it is indeed time. And we have a bit of an interesting lead in here because the first bit we heard from this album, classic clipping case of a song that we're not necessarily sure how designed for the album this ended up being, but this kind of feels like there was a point at which the idea for this record was incepted. And I believe it was early last year, was it not?
I think I know where you're going with this, and if that's
Yeah.
the case, yes.
Basically, the song on Dead Channel Sky, Run It, is the first single for the album, but it existed before it was a single, technically speaking, is that parts of this song were available on Twitter when there was an exercise that a lot of musicians participated in when somebody, I forget exactly who it was, but
Oh,
they
I need to look it up
basically,
because he's actually a musician who's important to this story.
yes,
So I'm
he
gonna look it
basically
up real quick.
this musician that we'll name basically had a dream about a specific genre of music that had a specific set of parameters that was like, it had to be in this time signature with this kind of beat, and it had to emphasize kind of this specific thing. And then he like shared a snippet of a song. And then later that day, whoever runs the clipping Twitter account
It's
replied to that with,
David. I
"This
know it's
is
David. He
okay."
said so
David
before.
was like, "This is sick. I'm gonna do this." And then
He actually said I think I did it by accident because okay, here's where it goes. It's Drew Daniel from Matmos. Uh
yes, yes, that is
said he
important.
was dreaming about this very particular kind of music. It's in 5/4 time and at 212 BPM. David replies and says, "We're working on this that's 5/4 and 190. Close enough."
Yep. And that eventually did turn into, and
It
it
turned into
wasn't the
song
genre.
Go.
The
It
genre
turned into
is hit 'em. Is that what it was
Hit
called?
'em.
Hit 'em.
Yes.
And it became like a fucking meme on Twitter for like a week. It was like the last good thing that ever happened on that website. And like then eventually we get Run It, which, man, as far as clipping singles go, this has got to be one of the best because this shit is so much fun.
It's
This
not at
song
all
is
what I expected to hear.
ridiculous.
It's
It's
not at all
fucking
what I expected to hear out of this.
I love this song. I love this song. Like this song fucking like fully commits to its three verse ass structure because it is a long fucking song too. And you get this wonderful little fucking portrait that's accented by this sound that sounds like he's taken some shit from like UK club stuff. Like it's this really fucking thumping ass percussion, these really fucking like it sounds super synthetic too, which is really important to the aesthetic of the record eventually. But like we're also getting like a portrait of just like, is this next clipping album gonna be like cyberpunk? Like,
The answer
or
is
even
yes.
better, cyber horror? And boy, howdy, the answer to that is yeah, because I think maybe David played some cyberpunk and was just like, I have some thoughts.
So yeah, this is
we
straight up cyberpunk with a healthy dose of house music, which is
mm-hmm.
incredible to hear. Like you get through the intro, very standard by
Mm-hmm.
the metric of clipping intros. Not to say it's not good. It does something really well to establish the aesthetic, which is the beat is a sample of the dial tone of
Uh-huh.
dial-up.
And he's doing that fucking thing where he's like basically like you can hear him like dialing the phone and just being like kicking his feet up and fucking like about to deliver, just like going today. Like it's the
Yeah,
delivery's perfect for a character portrait.
you hear him like actively trying to get with the beat as it continues to like glitch and take shape. But once we actually get to the more iconic dial-up sampled sounds, the second half of that usual sequence, the beat and David's flow really takes off. And then you get Dominator, which
Mm.
feels so inspired by house music, which is so really interesting a direction for them to go for this album. I really, really like it.
It's got a line in it that like this has got to be one of the most like this is the clipping album where I feel like I've every time I've listened to it I really do pick up something new about a detail in a song because like there's a lot of shit that this album just fucking throws at you like really fucking quickly too. Like the pace of this shit is like normally clipping albums will like even if they'll start with a bang, they'll still ease you into it a little bit. Whereas like this album's ADHD is all fuck, which and I mean like perfect. Like that is totally the bit here that they're going for. The overstimulated kind of just like all-encompassing like Ready Player One ass future fucking like, you know, taking shit to task, but like there's also these lines that'll stick out like Avatar opportunity creating the capital and no cap audiences are infinitely more valuable when they think an ugly, inactive, fat and unfashionable in parenthetical kill
Kill
yourself,
yourself.
which fucking like again this is also really funny like a lot of dark humor's making it into this one and again a lot of it's kind of comically absurd but like that's I mean that's just where we're at. This is a very well timed album also. It's just it feels like it's kind of a response to well techno-fascism really but
Yeah.
like there's a lot of sort of like and like Run It also gets at like the idea of like being a courier, which like if you're familiar with cyberpunk fiction, that's like one of the biggest like tropes is that you know like you think about stories like Johnny Mnemonic or something. It's just like it's all about guys who are transmitting data, but like they are the vehicle for the data, and that's sort of like the idea of data corrupting you and changing you and then altering you into something that you were, and how like things that are relics of your past or relics of an organic body are like these intangible things that like once you lose them a part of you really just is gone forever and then supplanted by data. And like that element of horror is like it's very subtle but it's also it's really felt. Like every song here that hints around something poignant, you kind of think about it for a second and it's just like, oh, that's so like fucked and gross. And like basically this album to me is about the violation of bodily autonomy. It's about the idea that your body's not yours anymore and that if everything is information then you're information. And like that idea in the macro is one of the most fascinating that they've played with.
Mm. And it gets at the, the real way that stuff like this takes over, which is that there's an appeal to this
Hmm.
sometimes, right? It's sexy.
It's
I
the
back,
lifestyle, man.
yeah, back to Dominator, a waste of energy debating the mechanical for genitals when gender is so easily programmable. You know that.
It's yeah,
That
yeah, we
sentiment
know that.
appeals
We
to
fucking
me.
know that.
That sentiment appeals to me very obviously, but David is also right to insist that that kind of thing, those kinds of freedoms, can easily be co-opted into
I
techno-fascist,
mean,
right,
it is
states of
like
being.
techno-fascism is also just fucking like it is an extension of neoliberalism, like where it's just like you are like if you critique the one, you are critiquing the other at the end of the day. So like there's a lot of there's a lot to dig into on this album, on pretty much every single song, where it's like you there is a legitimate appeal to, you know, being able to change the channel, you know, being able to like, you know, use this to like just the idea of like putting up with the shit to ultimately escape it. Except the problem is that it's like when everything is integrated, can you escape?
Yeah. And that's where we get into Change of Channel, which takes a kind of breakbeat, very late 90s. I mean, this sounds straight up off the Matrix Reloaded soundtrack.
Yeah, like it could
Like,
be a
let's not
Chemical
even
Brothers
play.
song. It's sick as fuck, honestly. You're just like this sounds like a beat that could be the sound like you add some fucking guitars to it and Rob Zombie be singing over this shit. Like it's awesome.
Yeah. Oh God. I thought of something insane earlier, and now that you said Rob Zombie, because it was in relation to Rob Zombie, and now that you said that, I'm thinking about it. Fuck.
Look, it's the same kind of like Rob Zombie had that kind of like I mean, well, Dracula being in the Matrix soundtrack is basically the only argument I need to usher there of like the sonic similarities certainly are there, and you know, Clipping are never ones to like, I wouldn't say they incorporate rock, but they incorporate the sounds of rock into their music very, very frequently. And I mean, on here, it's like, you'll hear a spare guitar every once in a while, just like sampled as a part of something. You won't, it won't sound like a guitar, but it will be there. But it plays with sound in ways on here that I do think emphasize a lot of its thematic points in moments like Simple Degradation, Plucks 1 through 13, like when that's picked up again on the album, but it's completely deteriorated. Like the audio
Yeah.
sounds fucked the second time you hear this, which is like, oh, it's because the main character of this album is being so overloaded with information that they are literally losing parts of themselves, like Johnny Mnemonic, where you have to, like, it can only be data that is so much, otherwise it will overrun you and damage it. And that's when you get to moments like fucking Polaroids. I think is the key song on this album, which is
I
like
definitely think so too.
everything about the record that is poignant and has something to say about modernity is said here. And that like the Polaroids are dwelled on because precisely because nobody wants them. As David says in the song, is that they are such a relic because they are so organic, because they are tangible. We have gotten to the point where they are useless. The people who should value them as actual parts of who they were or a symbol of who they were, even they don't recognize how fucked it is that they can't value them. And like to me, that's the scariest thing on this whole album is the idea
Yeah.
that you dissociate from who you were so much that you don't even realize why valuing the things that you value is important at all, which is just that's a lot to talk about right now, TM.
Well, I want to talk about this. I want to go on a weird theoretical angle because I've been reading this
Please
book.
do. That's what we're
I've
here
been
for.
I've been reading this book about the history of photography called The Burden of Representation by a guy named John Tagg for my thesis. And something that he talks about in there is he calls it a democracy of the image. Basically, that throughout the history of the portrait as a concept, you see the narrative of a class item becoming continuously degraded over time in terms of its status indicator, right? The people
Yeah.
back in the day, the royalty were the only people that got portraits back when you could only paint. Then you have professional grade photography, but not anything that consumers can get a hold of. So like families can still get portraits done via paint or via the old, Shutterstock cameras of, you've seen Hugo putting over the thing over his head, big bulb goes off. You get your picture taken at the carnival, whatever. But then you can get to stuff like Kodak and stuff like Polaroid and then stuff like Kodak. And then this was written in the early 2000s, so there's not much in there about digital photography and cell phones, but obviously there is a lineage there as well of
Oh, for
as it
sure.
gets easier and easier to make a portrait, each individual portrait becomes less representative of the self because of the way we think about them, right? Our
Well,
philosophy that we apply to the self-portrait changes as they become easier to make.
and think about that right now in the context of what it means to make art. Because when you talk about something like that, you also have to consider not only is it the status of it degrading over time, but also the effort of it degrading over time.
Yeah.
Like those portraits that had to be made, they had to be painted. They had to be painted by somebody with skill that was basically unrivaled. And now, once it gets a hold of everyone, there is a dilution to what we see as art. And I feel like, with streaming, with AI, that's a really big thing that a lot of musicians are really fucking concerned about. And like, I mean, if you value art in any respect, it's just like think about the actual line that like say if you're an illustrator, the line that it takes between like you take away the internet and suddenly that person's portfolio goes up in smoke. It's gone. Like think about how much you lose if the digital information in your life is truly gone because there is something that like before it seems kind of like a tacky point to make of just like oh fucking like technology makes the soul go away like if I can fucking point to something is that I recently had clipping come along and blow apart my expectations by taking on this subject matter like this. And I had one of my other favorite artists, fucking Steven Wilson, drop an album where he farted around talking about AI and dumb, stupid bullshit for 40 goddamn minutes, and it made me infuriated. And so when I go back and like look at this idea and it's like, no, there is definitely something real about the fact that like we have again diluting the self until so that we can make everything available, but once everything is available, it becomes like kind of worthless. Like think about for a moment what would happen if like what if my Instagram suddenly was deleted, wiped off the face of the planet. I'm like, "Oh fuck, those photos of me and my fiance that aren't anywhere else. I don't have those anymore. What the fuck? I have all those pictures from when I was in high school of shit that I barely remember anymore, and those are gone. I don't have those on my phone. Like, and even if I did, like, if I get a new phone, fucking like." This is shit we have to really worry about now, like archiving things, making sure that we can preserve things. Otherwise, it's just, it's scary. It is.
I want to rewind a bit and maybe go into a different subject here. I want to talk about Dodger,
Mmm,
which after a song
fascinating
like
song.
after a song like Code, which feels like the kind of idyllic, it's a very intelligent song for clipping because it's taking the lingo of the digital world and putting it
Mm-hmm.
into their very natural oeuvre of like we're gonna show that the gangster life isn't all it's cracked up to be. But now the
Mm-hmm.
gangster is digital, baby. And
Mm-hmm. It's fucking
talk
Vera
talk
from Mr. Robot.
yeah, talk code to them, etc. But Dodger feels like it's kind of a spiritual sequel to that song where it's like you're seeing a narrative of somebody being provoked to, commit violent acts to purge malfeasances, to purge errors, stop the virus, right? Whatever the virus is, that is a word for something that could mean something entirely different in our understanding of what, deviance looks
Hmm.
like. That's what comes to my mind. But I just love that the third verse, he just completely goes into a McKinley Dixon flow.
Dude, it so is, man. I wasn't gonna say shit because that's a really fucking like, I noticed, but like, I
Well,
was like,
I mean that as a compliment,
oh,
right?
for
That he's able
sure.
to evoke that, like, because that's where we get more traditional instrumentation in the song as well, right? It
Oh,
feels
yeah.
very intentional. It feels like it evokes songs like that from McKinley Dixon, where it's a
Oh, yeah.
jazz crescendo that allows for, David's voice on that verse becomes more free, it becomes bouncier, it becomes more vibrant, just even the way he says, see how he run compared to everything else. There's a
Yeah.
there's a newfound life there that gets to the point of the song. So I
It
don't mean
really,
that as like a detriment of like, oh, I caught what
no,
you're doing
like,
there, buddy.
if anything, it's just a compliment to how flexible David's become. Like you can tell exactly what character he's going for at like any given moment because he is that strong at embodying characters at this point. It's like he's been doing it since day one, so it's only natural that he just kind of refine his abilities as he goes along. And I think again, that's just this whole fucking album is really solid at that. Like really good. I think that two things about this record stand out to me the most. The first is that this is like the most blood pumping clipping album to me. Like this is the I go for a run listening to this album and I'm like, I need to go for an hour and I don't need to stop just because it is so like it's about being overstimulated. It is about, going forward without stopping. It is a great album to listen to while you are doing something vaguely mindless that you need to get done. But the one thing about it that I will note is that I do feel like the elements of the sound design are really well implemented, but whenever there's like the harshness of the noise, it feels like it interrupts its own flow a little bit more than clipping usually do. Like its pacing is really fast, but there's several times where it does kind of like trip for a moment for me, where it kind of lays into the one idea of like the decaying audio, for instance, where it's like I feel the intended effect, but it almost feels a bit too effective in concert with the momentum of the album, if that makes any sense. Because like, there's not a point where I ever think that clipping ever stopped doing what they've been doing very, very well. But the framework of the album invites it to be a little bit thornier in just how it's paced, I suppose.
Yeah, there are definitely moments where I think the pace is off here, especially like um the move from Keep Pushing to Polaroids, which takes up two interludes,
Yeah, mood
basically.
organ in particular, kind of like lodging itself in there is something I'm still trying to. wrap my head around, I guess.
Yeah. And so there are moments here definitely where uh, the shorter songs don't feel like they contribute to that fast pace like they should in a way
Like they
that's
do on Splendor and Misery.
yeah, compared to like the breach on Splendor and Misery, where like everything going on in those 30 seconds is absolutely essential. Whereas
Hmm.
something like Malleus, I don't know. I don't know if that really helps with the pace of this.
Nah, I'm a bit indifferent to that part as well. And like they always last just a little too long. It's never like, oh, I'm impatient. It's like, no, we can move this along like a little bit. But there are moments on here where they do kind of experiment with certain things. Like for example, Mirror Shades. I think I just fucking love this song. Like
Oh,
it's
I love it.
very silly, but holy shit, if the I got my mirror shades is not like the head boppinest ass. Like I love that. It's very unserious, but in a way that's like, oh, this is about the like just kind of frivolous nature of the customization aspect of social media of just
Yeah,
like to the point where you even refer to God be wearing mirror shades, which also, the shades are mirrors because they look back like, it's like a metaphor, but like
yeah.
it's a really fun kind of like it's kind of like vaguely clubby, but in a way that makes me think of like Soft Cell, for instance, doing Tainted Love. Like it's like a really kind of throwback clubby, like and kind of specifically queer oriented club music too is like it really feels like that's what it's going for.
Well, yeah, I mean, and Mirror Shades makes me feels the most in line with, for me, the song that started this album cycle, which is their cover of Tipsy from early
Ah,
last
yeah,
year.
that's right. That's
That
right.
that song basically feels like the beginning of this album cycle to me because it's so, that industrial club, is what I'm going
Hmm.
to refer to it as here, feels like it fits right in here. At a
No.
certain point, you don't need it on this album, but I kind of wonder where it went. Frankly,
I
just because
feel
I
like
think it
at some
sounds really
point
good, but
for whatever reason I didn't even consider that, but you're totally right. That must have been like a proof of concept where they were like, "Hey, we really like this. Let's do more of it." And I mean again, like this is another resounding conceptual success that maybe is not quite as tightly put together as their last three statements, but when I'm talking about their last three statements, I'm talking about bona fide fucking masterclass efforts here. Like the fact that this is even slightly a step below is just kind of inevitable, but like it's also like the flaws don't even really matter to me because this does so much new cool shit that is awesome. So it's like it's just another great chapter in the clipping saga. Like there's these smaller artists that I feel like they're way less concerned with making like an opus album and way more just like building a rich body of work. And that's we like that to tear into the
Mhm.
oeuvre and such.
Yeah. And it also helps this album that it ends very nicely with
Oh,
these last two tracks are kind of perfect. I heard some
Aesop
criticism
Rock.
I heard some criticism of Welcome Home Warrior, which I tried not to look into too much conversation in advance of this, but
Hmm.
I couldn't help but hear some of like Welcome Home Warrior is a little bit like thematically simple in a way that clipping usually isn't. And I'm like, yeah, I see what you're saying there, but it is about propaganda.
Yeah.
It's stuff that's got
Yeah.
to appeal. It's stuff that has to appeal to your base impulses, right? To be a protector, to be a conqueror, to be a warrior. And but David has this kind of sardonic, passive aggressive tone to it, calling all cyber rat race escape artists to the clearing. Or the start of the verse after Aesop's. Your dedication to shaping the day to day to a place that matches the pixel congregation you pray to definitely makes you one of the tribe.
It's the voice in 1984 coming out of the speakers is what it is. It's
Exactly.
it's like and two, I love getting Aesop here specifically, not just because he's one of the few rappers who can match David's technicality and vocabulary, but because with the way he is and just like the songs that he makes, I think of a song like Defender off of The Impossible Kid, which is more or less exactly what this is, but it is intentionally subverting itself, where it's like, I'm the neighborhood badass who gets the baseball bat to chase the barking dog away. And he brings that exact same thing here of just like, a guy who thinks he's tough shit because he's doing something that's like normal, that like is like you're not special but you think that you're awesome because you get to puff up your chest a little bit. Like the
Yeah.
tone of that is very legible to me.
Yeah, I mean, he says it all in one line, weapon-toting soldiers built like Charlie Brown's Christmas tree.
Love that shit.
Of like,
Love that
yeah,
shit.
it's a very mean satire. It's full on Starship Troopers energy here. Of
Yeah,
like,
it may be it's like that's a song that applies to like subreddits at this point. Like it's just you can use that anywhere. Which, oh boy, speaking of things you can use anywhere, ask what happened.
oh boy, I
Song of the year, baby.
song of the year. I love this. It feels both in a sense of its fictional world and continuing threads on songs like Blood of the Fang, a way for David to kind of reflect on the history of marginalization, to, I mean, the title says it, to ask what happened, to figure out how we got here, how things got so shitty, and what we can do about it, if we can do anything at all.
This is effectively a hip hop song that fast forward the history of racial segregation. And you're like, it's like this, listening to this song is like watching Koyaanisqatsi. Like, you're just like, oh man, I'm watching civilization rapidly escalate and then degrade. Oh God. Except this is about collapsing social trends and societal trends. And, again, what gets you to the point where you're at the cyberpunk dystopia, and then that's where you pull back the layer and be like, motherfucker, the dystopia is real, you're in it, bitch.
You best start believing in dystopia.
You're in
You're in
one.
one.
Oh man. But like it truly is the most forward facing, just like David being like he's laying it all out there. It is like this is truly an album for the moment, honestly. Like they are able to really time their shit to feel as poignant and razor sharp as possible. And that is not stopping anytime soon, to the point where it's like, damn, man, did y'all know something? Because it feels like you did. And then you inevitably arrive at the conclusion of, yeah, they did know something because it's the same thing that's been happening over and over again throughout the history of, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, like,
Yeah.
and you get to the end of Ask What Happened, and that's what you feel like. You get like, oh man, that was the burden. Oh boy, I felt it. Good, great, awesome. Don't feel good about myself right now. But I mean, it's an incredible achievement. Like truly, it's maybe the most impressive thing I think that they have ever written, and it is just the final show-stopping moment on an album full of really distinct and really cool highlights. Like
Yeah.
I'm very, very satisfied with this. When I imagined like what I wanted a clipping cyberpunk album to be, they basically gave me everything I asked for.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this last song, I pair it with Blood of the Fang as
Hmm.
just peak moments of David's writing, of his performance. The beat on Ask What Happened leaves a twitch to be desired, but
Hmm.
I think the break beat that it develops in the second half is very good.
That's
And the minimalism
mhm.
in the first half works for what the song is trying to do, which is give, you know, David's "We didn't start the fire" about Black America.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, like, even in the sense that it's basically just like, hey, we didn't start the fires, kind of a bullshit song. What if I made it so that it was a little less bullshit? Like, it's like, yeah, we didn't start the fire, but somebody's got to fucking put it out, Billy. Um, and to before we wrap up fully here, one thing I do want to shout out is that they did come out with something in 2020 that was kind of a I don't know if it was just like it was some sort of exclusive release for a time, and then it got put on streaming. I think actually within the last year. It's their live album, their double live album entitled Double Live. Uh, and I relegate this here for one specific purpose, in that this is a clipping super fan only project. And the reason I say that is not just because it is the furthest they've leaned into pure sound collage and like audio construction, but because in order to understand why this album is as good as it is, you need to be familiar with their entire career. And the reason you need to do that is because this is it's a live album and it is a recorded live album. But the thing is, what if you had to record the live album and the performance, you couldn't actually record it? So you use the environment. You hear outside the club, you hear inside, you hear underneath, you hear from a block away, you hear under the building in the sewers. And in these moments, the sound collage of the environments will meld together to create moments from clipping songs that you can hear in concert with David very faintly. So that is to say, this is totally an experiment, and it's absolutely one of my favorite live albums ever. It's so fucking sick, man. Like
It's
it's
so
novel.
bizarre.
It is
Like I
novel and odd, but I love it.
I listened to this in preparation for this because I had never heard this before. I didn't even know where to find it.
Hmm.
But I eventually did. And oh man, it's simulates like almost the experience of being on tour. You know what I mean? Of
Yes,
all these
yes, it
kinds of
does.
different performances at these different sites kind of bleeding in together in the memory. You know, it
Hmm.
feels like you've hacked into David's brain and you're just getting what he remembers of the whole
To
thing.
me, this like the way I imagine it is that there's like a Benoit Debie camera, and this is like irreversible, just going to different places and gliding in and out of building, or John Wick 4, where the camera's just going out of
Yeah.
the building and then going sweeping under here, and you just hear it from the other thing. Like you've got the fucking, I think the most challenging moment on the album is in fact the sewer part, Rookery, which I mean there's some gas bubbles and some sounds that it's farts. It's farts. I'm just gonna say it. It's farts. You can't get around that shit. At the same time, though, you get to the point where it's like, oh, the popping of the rhythm here actually matches this song. Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Again, this is not a I'm listening to music kind of thing. This is a I want to hear someone do something that no one else has ever done.
Yeah. No. Love Double Live. Can't say I'll listen to it every day or anything, but
No.
it's a very, very exciting project to sit down with for the first time because I mean, if you're like me and you know this discography kind of back to front, getting to hear how it's treated is a very nice experience. It's almost like, being excited for a remaster of a video game that you love, How are they going
Yeah.
to handle this sequence that I remember so much? Oh, I like the way that they did this. Or like, watching a great performance of a Shakespeare play and seeing all the unique particulars. It feels like this is made in collaboration with the guy, Christopher Flieger.
Mhm.
Feels like Flieger's take on clipping as a work of art. You know what I mean?
And it's like the apex to me of the noise part of their sound, because like while it never diminishes or goes away, they've just kind of continually kept using that creative aspect. It's like that, but it takes over its whole record. You get to hear clipping in the most primordial state and let it like and it evolves sonically. It's again, I've never heard anything like it before. And again, though, that's a deeper digging kind of thing. Don't start here
Don't start with that.
unless you just fucking love sound collage. And I mean like I get it, I'm there with you, but that's also something that I have to enjoy in very specific spurts. But that said, I will say I think clipping are insanely brave to continue that tradition forward because not only do they blend that with hip hop in a way that's very honest to their roots, it's like to do that with something so abrasive and to stick with it as long as they have, that takes dedication that a lot of people just don't fucking have because that's such a barrier for entry that people who listen to music avidly still might not get along with. It's just like, ah, yeah, there are parts of this that just fucking hurt my ears. I don't want to listen to it, and then they just give up. But
Yeah.
in an age where the economy is of attention more than anything else, it is just another attempt to reach through the noise, as it were, on that new album, and fucking like get you to pay attention, which again, I am more and more as I get older respecting that even though something might not be intuitively designed in an art form, if it gets my attention, then sometimes that's better than something just being good because I like things to be good more than I like them to be digestible.
Yeah. And for me, you know, we keep putting all these like cushions underneath it. But clearly these guys do not think what they're doing is so abrasive that they don't enjoy
No,
doing it. You know what I mean?
no.
I want to commend them for doing what they clearly love doing and for sticking with it and finding an audience, people like us, that really fuck with it. And
Yeah,
it
and it's
doesn't, nothing has
fascinating.
to, yeah, nothing has to be for everybody. This is something that we've talked about in the past.
That's the idea of just like, there's a lot of talk about gatekeeping and whatnot, and I kind of think that like I do believe in a form of gatekeeping. I don't believe in people being gatekeepers because that opens up too many cans of worms. So the idea of making something unfriendly in its packaging as the form of being like, hey, this is for some people and not everybody, that's kind of the way of the future. It's like, black metal was kind of ahead of the curve in that, making all that stuff sound like dog ass did keep it insulated, maybe insulated in the wrong places, but this type of idea, this is reclaiming that idea and making it really fucking valuable, like preserving something and innovating at the same time. That's how you make something timeless.
Yeah. And I've loved the artistic journey that I've been able to go on with clipping. I've felt myself grow as a critic, just trying to tackle my perspective on them and me
Hmm.
being unafraid to just be like, yeah, my favorite band is these weird dudes that make this weird hip hop music that doesn't sound like anything you've ever heard before.
Yeah.
Um, because it just resonates with me. Like I've had to get over, I'm not gonna lie to you. I scared the hose with some of this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like there are parts where like like Ree will actually appreciate a song like 96 Nev Campbell or something because that's pulling from tropes that like that shows you that clipping do have like there's an audience there. Like don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, they can be unfriendly, but again, like your fucking horror friends, like they appeal to the genre so strongly, and that's what really makes me love them is that they're unapologetic in it to the point where if you're not so into it that you know every single person who's played Jason in every single one of the Friday the 13th movies, you know what? Maybe some things should just be made for those freaks. It's like I mean, freaks make the world go round,
Freaks deserve good art, man.
and I can't wait to see what kind of stuff clipping does because like it really does seem like the project that they take all of their kind of excess success with and just get to dump it all in there, and it's just like that's such an amazing thing to have. And like the fact that they've risen in profile, I mean, again, it's like with Tyler of just like I don't know how they've managed to become more unique and still become more popular, but again, if you aren't on, there's literally never been a better time to get into them because they've got an album out that's relatively quite accessible for them. So,
Yeah.
you can get in there, you can get in. I mean, fucking go back to any of these segments and just listen. I have a really difficult time imagining the person who listens to, There Existed an Addiction to Blood and isn't like, yeah, I don't at least love 4 or 5 songs on this album. Like, just branch out a little bit. I promise you won't regret it. You really won't.
Right. Okay. Now let's do the big thing that we do at the end of all these
The
Discogs.
big thing, baby.
Do you want to start with the ranking?
Okay. I will do the ranking. I will say that I'll just kind of toss all of the projects that I have on me and rank them all together. I'll say that I'll put the Chain Jump release is the bottom for me. And then I'll say after that is maybe the self-titled of unofficial self-titled release, not clipping without the eye. That'll come later. And then afterwards, I'll say Face. Then after that, I will say Wriggle. After that, I will say Midcity. After that, I will say Dead Channel Sky. After that, I will say, oh God, that's tough. Yeah, Splendor and Misery, then Visions of Bodies Being Burned, and There Existed Addiction to Blood are kind of the joint number one.
Okay. What about Plong? Where's the
Oh,
flipping
Klopong,
without the eyes?
I'm gonna put that on the same level as Dead Channel Sky. I like those albums about exactly the same.
Okay. I'm just gonna do the albums. So for me, I love Mid-City. I've defended Mid-City. Doesn't mean it's not my least favorite.
Yeah, yeah.
Still
Still
very good
great, still
album.
great.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, very good album. So Mid-City, Dead Channel Sky. Again, still love that album, still great. Really appreciate what it's doing. Self-titled, Cool Ping above that. Then There Existed in Visions, and then Splendor and Misery at the top for me.
I'm so glad that I got somebody who rides that hard for Splendor and Misery on here, just because that's kind of the odd duck in their discography so far. And I'm always like, no, 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 guys, this is it. So yeah, fucking listen to clipping. That's about all I got. Jen, you got anything you want to fucking toss out there or recommend or fucking what you got going on?
Nah, here's one thing I'll shout, one sample mention that I wanted to tell you about because I remember sending you a text about this years ago and never getting a reply.
Fuck.
I was randomly listening to this power electronics album called GR by Death Pile.
Right. Okay. Okay.
It's a concept album from the perspective of the Green River Killer. And you can find a sample of a prominent clipping song on that album. I'm not going to tell you which
Interesting.
one it is because I want it to be a surprise.
Okay. Okay. All right. I'll have to follow up with that. Um, I guess in terms of what to expect, I don't know which of these will be out sooner. I'm probably going to prioritize this one just because the other thing I'm talking about will probably take longer, and I would like to get it out because the last video we did kind of ends with a clipping thing and continuity and all that. But I am teaming up with my friend Luke, who's been on several videos on this channel, who's talked to me about a bunch of stuff, and we are talking about the entirety of Dragon Ball. Not Dragon Ball
Holy
Z,
shit.
all of it. I'm talking Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball GT, Dragon Ball Abridged, Dragon Ball Daima, Dragon Ball Super, all of it.
You're saying
We
a bunch of
we
words that I don't understand.
See, we're giving Dragon Ball the Bleach treatment, and we are retrospecting everything. The games, even I have gone to considerable lengths to like play as much as I could up until this point. We are going to be breaking that down to an atomic fucking level, just like Jen and I did with Bleach. So fucking look forward to that because that's gonna be a big one. It's kind of the what Luke and I are doing to fucking kind of process losing Akira Toriyama, so that'll be our tribute to him. So look forward to that being on the horizon. And hey, whenever Bleach Part 4 rolls around, you could expect
We,
Jen and
we'll be
I to
back on it.
definitely
I
be
promise we're
back.
not just sitting on this. We're waiting
Oh
for it to
yeah.
finish airing.
We've got a lot of stuff in the wings. Trust me. We're things will be happening. Trust me. So until then, everybody, rock over London, rock on Chicago. It's clipping, bitch.